Bienvenidos a News 24, el magazine de análisis y noticias en español de i24 News. Yo soy Nicole Michel. A petición de nuestro querido público que nos ve desde Estados Unidos, América Latina, como en Europa y Medio Oriente, a continuación hemos preparado un programa muy especial, los Best of de News 24, las entrevistas y reportajes que más impactos le generó, porque hemos creado en español un periodismo de nivel desde Medio Oriente. La lucha contra el antisemitismo es fundamental. En una entrevista exclusiva para i24 News, el comisionario Fernando Lottenberg de la Organización de Estados Americanos dejó clara la postura de la organización hacia el mundo judío. Nos conseguimos con el prestigioso abogado y constitucionalista brasileño Fernando Lottenberg. Fernando, muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros.
Un gusto.
Aquí en Tel Aviv, en i24 News.
Un gusto y realmente un placer poder estar con vosotros.
Muchísimas gracias. Como sabemos, eres comisionario de la OEA para el monitoreo y el combate contra el antisemitismo, algo muy importante en estos tiempos de poder luchar contra la discriminación y el odio, más allá de lo que significa el combate al antisemitismo, ¿no?, en el judaísmo. Ha sido presidente de la Federación de Comunidades Judías de Brasil. Eres un gran defensor de la democracia y todos los derechos humanos. ¿Cómo hacer todas estas actividades? Y sabemos que viajas por distintas partes del mundo en unos momentos tan difíciles que ha vivido Israel a partir del 7 de octubre, pero algo muy importante también de recalcar, no es tan solo Israel, el mundo judío. Y tú que representas todo lo que tiene que ver con un continente, el continente latinoamericano, con una comunidad hispana que son 600 millones de personas.
Sí, bueno, estar acá después del 7 de octubre por la primera vez ya es una experiencia muy impactante, porque habemos escuchado, habemos leído, visto en la televisión y sigo i24 en las redes. Pero cuando te vas a Niroz, cuando te vas al Festival Nova y hablas con la gente que estuvo ahí, es algo muy distinto y que emociona mucho. Y nosotros estábamos viendo en nuestra parte del mundo cómo se incrementó el antisemitismo a partir del 7 de octubre. Hubo una pequeña ola de buena voluntad, de comprensión, pero luego se pasó y vimos la gente hablando las cosas como comparando a los nazis o hablando de genocidio y usando términos que no imaginábamos que sería posible. Así que creo que esta función, como la de los otros colegas que tenemos, demuestra que países, gobiernos, instituciones multilaterales están preocupadas porque el antisemitismo es algo que empieza con los judíos, pero no termina con los judíos. Y es algo que puede ser un instrumento que va al final derrotar tanto la democracia como los derechos humanos.
¿Cuál es el compromiso ahora, Fernando, que tiene la Organización de Estados Americanos, su secretario general, Luis Almagro, que ha sido un gran defensor de los derechos humanos en distintas partes de Latinoamérica y en general de lo que significa la importancia de la lucha contra el odio y la discriminación? ¿Cuál es ahora el enfoque que ha dado la Organización de Estados Americanos con respecto a Israel y al mundo judío?
Bueno, sabes que la Secretaría General de la OEA ya adoptó la definición de antisemitismo de la IRA y es parte de mi mandato expandir esa adopción por otros países. Hoy tenemos en las Américas 7 países que ya la adoptan y en mi mandato 3 se agregaron, que son Colombia, Guatemala y Panamá. Esta es una lucha permanente, tiene la comprensión del secretario general y el incentivo, y él ha publicado ya desde el comienzo, después del 7 de octubre, una condena muy fuerte de que pasó y ahora sobre el ataque de Irán. Así que creo que la posición es muy coherente y clara por parte de la organización.
Exacto, lo hemos visto, estuvieron aquí los gobernadores de Goiás y de Sao Paulo, que ellos también se adhirieron a esta definición y es importante eso impulsarlo, ¿no? Sabemos que tú, Fernando, eres un impulsor de todo lo que es la educación y los tratados internacionales dentro de la Organización de Estados Americanos. Me gustaría saber ahora cómo lo estás enfocando y algo muy importante. ¿Han trabajado ustedes el tema de los medios de comunicación? porque no es tan solo la educación con respecto a los institutos en toda Latinoamérica y los tratados, sino los medios de comunicación.
Claro que sí. Es ahí donde se libra la batalla más importante. Medios de comunicación tradicionales y los nuevos medios que se llaman redes sociales. Es un reto que nosotros estamos enviados especiales de todo el mundo con un subgrupo dentro de nuestro comité para enfrentar esta cuestión. Tenemos en las Américas convenciones importantes, como has mencionado, tratados contra el racismo, contra la discriminación, y incentivamos que más países las adopten y la transformen en leyes internas, porque nosotros vemos la cosa en dos caminos. El primer, de la educación. La gente tiene que saber quién son los judíos, qué pasaron, cuál es su historia, qué pasó en el Holocausto, para que no lo nieguen, para que no lo distorsionen, y hay instrumentos para eso. Brasil, por ejemplo, cuando yo estaba en la Federación de Comunidades Judías, hizo la inclusión en su currículo nacional de la enseñanza del Holocausto. Otros países deben hacerlo también. Y especialmente medios de comunicación y redes sociales, el desafío de la regulamentación es algo que está muy presente. Porque vea, una emisora como I-24 tiene sus reglas, sabes lo que se puede decir, lo que no se puede decir, porque hay leyes que las regulan. Tiene responsabilidad usted como periodista, el editor, el dueño, y en las redes esto no pasa así. Parece que es algo como un territorio libre donde el odio se puede proliferar, donde la discriminación no tiene límites, y estamos muy empeñados en hacer con que esto cambie. Puede ser algo que tiene que ver con autorregulación, que las redes mismas tengan que se poner límites, y el otro, la regulación pública, sea por leyes, sea por decisiones judiciales.
Exactamente. Bueno, el compromiso con los medios y la televisión es un medio que hay que buscar en acercarse y mantenerlo, independientemente que están las redes sociales. Cierto que incluso la Organización de Estados Americanos congrega a todos los países locales, con excepción de Cuba, ¿no? Aparte de eso, España también ha adoptado una legislación contra la lucha contra el antisemitismo. ¿Cómo es esa lucha en una diversa América Latina?
Bueno, sabes que tenemos...
Y el mundo hispano.
Sí, tenemos América Latina, tenemos Américas en general, porque Estados Unidos y Canadá también son parte de la OEA. Sí. Y claro, hay que hacer las cosas distintas por cada estado. La OEA no es una organización que está por arriba de los estados. En verdad, los estados son parte de la OEA y tienen representantes generales permanentes que conducen la organización. La secretaría, el comisionado, son instrumentos de su acción. Así que hay que poner, con las convenciones podemos tener algo que sea general, y en cada país buscar legislación específica que pueda atender a la conformación legal local. Por ejemplo, Estados Unidos tiene el tema de la primera enmienda. Claro. Así que es muy difícil poner límites a lo que sea alguna restricción que en otros países como Brasil, Argentina o España sí es posible. Así que estamos luchando para que donde se pueda se sepa que no hay derechos absolutos. Claro. Nosotros estamos muy a favor de la libertad de expresión, y vos conocés por su experiencia en Venezuela cómo este es un bien precioso y por veces raro en nuestra región. Nosotros todos ya sufrimos lo que son dictaduras, lo que son restricciones. Así que no es esto que queremos, pero queremos que la libertad de expresión conviva con otros principios, no con el racismo, no con la discriminación, pero que una cosa se limite a la otra.
Bueno, justamente sacabas el tema de Venezuela, de donde yo soy origen, además de ser israelí. Hay un antisionismo específico en la izquierda, en América Latina. Hay diferentes formas de antisemitismo en América Latina. Hay un fundamentalismo islámico que no concierne al continente, y lo hemos visto reflejado en la penetración de Irán en América Latina, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia, que son países que le han dado la apertura. Por supuesto, eso preocupa a la región, preocupa a Estados Unidos, Canadá. ¿Cómo crees tú que se puede, y en un momento en los que Israel tuvo ese ataque tan fuerte y por primera vez desde 1948, en la creación de su Estado, ¿Cuál es la preocupación que tiene la región con respecto a esa penetración de Irán en América Latina?
Sí, es muy seria, la llevamos muy en serio, porque tuvimos, entre otros, los ataques en AMIA, en la embajada israelí en Buenos Aires, que después de 30 años la justicia finalmente confirmó lo que todos ya conocíamos, que Irán lo formuló y Hezbollah lo ejecutó. Así que tenemos, el antisemitismo puede ser de extrema derecha, de extrema izquierda, del fundamentalismo islámico, es como un triángulo y hay que combatirlos a todos procurando entender de dónde vienen. Por ejemplo, si en Charlottesville viene uno que dice Jews will not replace us en la marcha que hicieron, o después en Pittsburgh porque creen que los judíos ayudan a los refugiados a sustituir la población blanca de los Estados Unidos. Este es algo de derecha. En la izquierda es algo que tiene más que ver con Israel y yo personalmente te digo, Nicole, que tengo un poco de restricción al termo antisionismo. Yo prefiero, como otros colegas, el antisemitismo relacionado con el Estado de Israel, porque el sionismo está ahí. Ya es algo que el objetivo del sionismo era construir un Estado en la tierra ancestral del pueblo judío. Está bien, ya estamos aquí y Israel les dice cómo se reencuentra de la Revolución Francesa. No tiene muy sentido. Pero la cosa que en el Estado de los judíos, en el Estado donde vive casi la mitad de la población judía mundial, se ve la misma ola, los antiguos tropos reciclados que matan a niños, que están en el control, que es todo tipo de teoría de conspiración que antes era aplicado a los judíos y después del Holocausto ya ser antisemita no es algo aceptable, ahora se torna contra el Estado de Israel.
Muy corto ya, los pogroms en noviembre de 1938 sucedieron, los ataques el 7 de octubre de 2023. Han pasado ya 85 años. Fernando, ¿cuál es el compromiso ahora para la lucha contra el antisemitismo?
El compromiso es de seguir luchando firmemente contra todo tipo de discriminación, contra el discurso de odio y contra los ataques violentos a los judíos, sea en Israel, sea en fuera de Israel. El antisemitismo, como yo he dicho antes, es algo que se manifiesta contra los judíos, pero tiene como algo la convivencia democrática. Es algo, una teoría de la conspiración que imagina que hay gente que está en el control, que tiene más poder que los otros, que tiene más recursos que los otros y no puede ser así. Tenemos que estar juntos. La mejor manera de defender a las minorías es defender la democracia, es defender a los derechos humanos y para eso estamos.
Fernando, muchísimas gracias por haber estado con nosotros en i24 News. Beit el-Faraja es un lugar de encuentro gastronómico en la ciudad de Aco, donde judías y musulmanas comparten y la magia de la coexistencia tiene sabores orientales. Hola, shalom, salam aleikum. Nos conseguimos en la ciudad antigua de Aco, ante un edificio de la época de los romanos, en Beit el-Faraja, un lugar de encuentro entre musulmanas y judías. Las fotos que se encuentran alrededor son los vecinos de esta casa, de Beit el-Faraja. Vamos a conseguirnos con Katie para saber cómo se vive en este lugar. Thank you, gracias. Vamos a pasar, acompáñenme. Cuéntame, ¿por qué has creado Beit el-Faraja? ¿Cuál es el concepto? ¿Cómo ha sido el inicio de este maravilloso proyecto?
Muchas gracias por venir a conocer Beit el-Faraja. Creemos que mucha gente que viene a Aco a pasar unos días y van a hoteles o restaurantes se pierden la oportunidad de poder encontrarse con la gente del lugar. Para que puedan conocernos, abrimos una cocina en Beit el-Faraja, que en árabe quiere decir la cocina de la mariposa. Y queremos que la gente que se allegue a esta casa tenga una experiencia conjunta para conocerse, que todos somos iguales, que tan solo hay que conocer mejor uno al otro. Este es el espacio ideal para que eso ocurra.
Ahora entramos a las cocinas de Beit el-Faraja. Acompáñenme con la directora de este maravilloso lugar, de esta cocina, que se llama Hadija. Acompáñenme.
Nos disponemos a preparar cubineya.
Tenemos aquí varios condimentos. Tenemos aceite de oliva, nana y ají picante y cúrcuma. Hacemos una masa y mezclamos todo. Esta es salsa de granadas y hay que poner muy poquito. El que quiera puede después agregar más.
Yo te... A ver.
Hadija nos invita a degustar este plato vegetariano al que rozamos un poco de limón para darle más atrevimiento al paladar.
Hadija, yo quería saber un poco de dónde eres, Bei Foad. ¿Naciste aquí en Aco? Ya.
Yo nací en Aco, me llamo Hadija Abdani. Tengo 3 hijos, 2 niñas y un niño. Soy la cocinera profesional de Bet El Farasha.
Hadija, ¿cómo es la vida entre árabes y judíos?
Este lugar lo que nos permite es conocernos y amarnos. Las delicias que cocinamos les salen desde lo más profundo del corazón. Y yo les devuelvo mi amor a todos haciendo recetas únicas del estilo Aco y sentimos que somos una familia.
Y ahora es fija.
Hoy haremos pan de pita, el estilo Aco, que se hace con agua que contiene azafrán. Agua que preparamos ayer por la noche y la usamos para preparar el pan. Para lograr este color, pusimos el azafrán en el agua y mezclamos con la harina. Tenemos yogurt, miel y carne fresca. Tenemos la carne, a la que le agregamos cebolla y perejil. La salsa tiene pimienta y la mezclamos con la carne. Tenemos pimienta roja, pimienta negra y comino. Con toda esta mezcla hacemos un condimento. Abrimos el pan de pita, que como verán tiene color amarillo por el azafrán.
Es ella.
Tomamos un poco de carne y los esparcimos cubriendo todo el pan y luego lo pasamos por el aceite de oliva. Al horno va por unos 10 a 15 minutos y tendrán un plato delicioso.
Anat, ¿qué? Tu familia es de Bulgaria. Abba, tu papá. El papá de Anat es de Bulgaria. O sea, son sefaradí. Español, habla español, ladino, ¿no?
Ladino.
Ay, qué maravilla, qué bonito. ¡Wow! Tiene 82 años su papá. Oh, ¡qué belleza!
¡Qué belleza!
¡Qué belleza!
Pincelamos en aceite de oliva las esfillas para llevarlas al horno.
Bien. Muy bien. 10 minutos.
La cocina es un lugar universal. Conecta culturas y personas, risas, una misma pasión, la buena gastronomía, la energía positiva entre judías y musulmanas en Aco. Anat, la israelí, me confesó.
Me encanta latinos.
¡Latinos!
Queremos tridi. Es una mezcla de hummus, galletas, crispy y yogurt al que le agregamos limón y tajina, sal, limón, nana y cúrcuma. Y agregamos un poco de comino.
Y ahora almendras tostadas.
El arte culinario de Aco tiene una importante influencia libanesa, siria y productos agrícolas de las colinas de la región. Quizá la paz en Medio Oriente la podamos lograr a través de la gastronomía, con olores orientales de cúrcuma, nana, azafrán, trabajándola juntas, con las manos, extensiones del corazón.
Y en este lugar tan maravilloso de convivencia entre árabes y judías, nos despedimos en Beit El Farasha con una cocina deliciosa. ¿Y cómo le decimos a todos? ¡Adiós! I-24 News. Latinos estuvo presente en la visita realizada por los gobernadores brasileños de Sao Paulo y Goiás. En la ciudad de Ranana, a unos 15 kilómetros de Tel Aviv, se reunieron con la comunidad brasileña en Israel. Veamos el siguiente reportaje. En la ciudad de Ranana, a 15 kilómetros de Tel Aviv, en su teatro municipal Yad Levanim, la comunidad brasileña, junto a los anfitriones de la ciudad, el alcalde Chaim Broide y el filántropo brasileño-israelí Moti Sonnenfeld, recibieron a los gobernadores de Sao Paulo, Tarcisio de Freitas, y de Goiás, Ronaldo Callado, quienes han visitado Israel con la organización de Conexión Israel, un viaje de encuentro con la tragedia vivida en tierras hebreas. Cada uno de los importantes presentes nos dieron sus impresiones que conecta Israel y Brasil.
ברעננה יש את הקהילה הכי גדולה של עולים מברזיל, וכאשר אני כראש העיר מקבל כאן שני מושלים שתומכים בישראל, אנחנו עושים את הכל לחבק אותם ולהגיד להם תודה. אנחנו זקוקים לתמיכה הזאת היום כשהאנטישמיות בעולם עולה.
A visita de dois governadores dos dois estados mais pujantes da nossa nação aqui em Israel alivia para nós, como brasileiros, a fala malfadada do presidente da nossa república, que não representou a nação na sua fala.
Eu acho fundamental o apoio desses políticos. Eles vieram aqui de coração, eles vieram aqui mostrando carinho pelo povo de Israel, eles vieram aqui para ver a verdade.
Na verdade, esses dois governadores vieram ver de perto qual é de verdade o estado do povo de Israel, o que ele de verdade faz. Eles vêm trazer um pouco de luz no meio de muita escuridão. Então eles visitaram todos os kibbutzim lá do sul do país, onde lá houve os ataques terroristas do Hamas, desses desumanos. E eu acho que a visita deles para cá pode trazer um pouco de luz para o mundo inteiro. Em primeiro lugar para o Brasil, que tem muitas informações, desinformações, coisas erradas que falam lá em relação ao nosso país, ao nosso povo, o povo de Israel. Então, com essas informações, com essa visita que eles vieram para cá, eles estão vendo o que de fato aconteceu, eles vão conseguir influenciar as pessoas que estão perto deles para entender melhor um pouco do que é o povo de Israel, o exército de Israel, que é o exército mais ético do mundo, e tudo que eles fazem é para nos defender desses terroristas que nos querem atacar.
Nosotros en Israel amamos a Brasil, nosotros sabemos que Brasil también ama a Israel y esas relaciones no pueden desaparecer ahora, que decir, desde la creación del Estado de Israel, con la ayuda de Osvaldo Aranha, tenemos esas relaciones tan cercanas y ellas tienen que seguir y seguir mejorando.
I made this book in Portuguese because I have many followers from Brazil that love Israel, they love the Israeli food, they love the Israeli lifestyle.
El himno de Brasil, compuesto por Francisco Manuel da Silva, el aplauso, la guitarra, el discurso y las emociones. El recuerdo a Naamá Levi, secuestrada, hija de la ciudad de Ranana. Los gobernadores y sus palabras de apoyo.
Naquele momento, brasileiro, aí sim homem que tinha postura de estadista, Osvaldo Aranha, presidindo a sessão na ONU, com a visão de homem solidário, humanitário, digno do cargo que ocupava, soube numa votação histórica na ONU reconhecer por 33 votos a 13 a vitória do Estado de Israel e do Estado da Palestina. A construção de um povo que, sem dúvida alguma, soube superar dificuldades. De mais de 10 mil palestinos haviam sido tratados nos hospitais. E eu fico imaginando, porque como médico que sou, nada é mais gratificante na vida do que o gesto de cidadão que foi operado. Às vezes a gente não se lembra dele, mas ele não nos esquece. E ele sempre dirige uma palavra, graças a Deus.
Nós temos que dar suporte para vocês. Nem que seja, às vezes, a simples palavra. Estamos juntos, estamos aqui, não vamos deixar vocês sozinhos. E a gente fica pensando, meu Deus, por que tanta perseguição? Imagine que o povo que foi escravo no Egito, que sofreu com babilônicos, que sofreu na mão dos romanos, que sofreu os horrores do Holocausto. E a gente imagina que nada de ruim vai acontecer depois de uma tragédia tão violenta, de algo tão agressivo. Esse povo é barbaramente atacado no dia 7 de outubro. E por quê? Por que razão? Se enganam quem pensa que aquela turma, aqueles terroristas do Hamas, querem um Estado palestino. Não querem. Está claro que eles querem a destruição de Israel. E esse é só o começo.
Obrigado, gobernadores.
Hasta aquí nuestro programa de hoy. A través del QR nos gustaría saber desde dónde nos ven. Acabamos de lanzar nuestro canal de YouTube. Asegúrate de suscribirte para tener contenido exclusivo desde Israel en español. En nuestros estudios en Tel Aviv de i24 News me despido. Gracias por estar con nosotros. Será hasta la próxima.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Bienvenidos a News 24, el magazine de análisis y noticias en español de i24 News. Yo soy Nicole Michel. A petición de nuestro querido público que nos ve desde Estados Unidos, América Latina, como en Europa y Medio Oriente, a continuación hemos preparado un programa muy especial, los Best of de News 24, las entrevistas y reportajes que más impactos le generó, porque hemos creado en español un periodismo de nivel desde Medio Oriente. La visión bengurionista del primer ministro de Israel a través de los ojos del reconocido periodista Enrique Zimmerman. Enrique, acaba de sonar la alarma que cada año nos recuerda en Israel a los 6 millones de judíos que fallecieron.
Así es. Estos 6 millones fueron asesinados solamente por ser judíos. Y el 7 de octubre del año pasado pasó algo similar. El mayor número de judíos de la historia desde el principio del sionismo moderno, 142 años. En un solo día fueron asesinados también, y es estar aquí en este momento, en estos minutos de silencio, frente a la casa de Ben Gurión, el hombre al que le debemos todo, y recordar las víctimas del Holocausto y las víctimas del pequeño Holocausto que ocurrió aquí el día 7 de octubre del 2023. Son muchos sentimientos al mismo tiempo y no es fácil superar todo lo que uno siente dentro en este momento.
¿Me acompañarías a la casa de David Ben Gurión para sentir a través de tu visión cuál sería la visión bengurionista?
Será un honor.
Vamos.
Enrique, estamos en el escritorio de David Ben Gurión. Normalmente está cerrado, pero hoy lo han abierto especial para nosotros.
Increíble la energía que se respira aquí. Impresionante.
¿Quieres sentarte?
Es un sueño.
¿Cómo te sientes en la silla de David Ben Gurión? Fuerte.
La verdad que, sabes, Nicole, que yo entrevisté muchos líderes del mundo, pero mi gran sueño sería haber entrevistado a David Ben Gurión, haberle conocido personalmente. Y este momento de estar aquí sentado en su silla, en este rincón que está cerrado todo el tiempo y que nos lo han abierto especialmente, es una energía extraordinaria, es un poco estar con él. Y estar con un líder, Nicole, que tiene en su mesa, en una habitación tan pequeña donde él escribió la Declaración de Independencia de Israel, tiene las biografías de cientos de soldados que murieron en combate, para recordarse siempre del precio que pagamos por lograr nuestra soberanía. Un líder que tiene algo así es uno de los líderes, quizás el líder más admirable de la historia judía.
Y en esta energía bengurionista, digamos, los logros y desafíos que tenemos a partir de ahora en Israel, que hemos tenido y los desafíos que necesitamos.
Yo creo que Israel y lo que aquí ocurrió en los últimos 140 años es uno, si no, el mayor logro de la humanidad en el último siglo, sin duda. Es algo que va en contra de todo lo que se podía imaginar. Nadie soñó que algo así sería posible. De hecho, yo creo que cuando él se sentó aquí y escribió la Declaración de la Independencia, a lo mejor ni él estaba seguro que iba a aguantar, que iba a resistir. Fíjate la cara dura de este hombre, de 1,52 m, un pequeño Napoleón, que se sentaba aquí y que con 600.000 judíos que había en esa época, en el 48 aquí, de los cuales la mitad eran supervivientes del Holocausto, exacto, gente herida en sus almas, herida en sus cuerpos, él decide crear un Estado. Y él sabe que el día siguiente va a ser atacado, quizás el mismo día, por varios ejércitos regulares árabes. Y él no tiene soldados, él no tiene armas. O sea, nadie está seguro que este pequeño Estado que él va a declarar va a resistir. Y sin embargo pasaron 76 años, nos aproximamos a los 100, y yo hablaba mucho con Shimon Peres, que era alumno de Ben Gurión, y él me decía, wow, ¿qué diría David si levantara cabeza ahora por un momento y pudiese ver lo que ocurrió?
¿Qué vería en estos momentos? ¿Qué sentiría de ver la Israel de hoy en día y más aún después del 7 de octubre?
Sentiría que probablemente que hay decisiones muy serias que hay que tomar. Ben Gurión declaró la independencia de Israel por primera vez en 2 milenios. Hubo 2 experiencias de soberanía judía en esta tierra, una con el rey David y el rey Salomón, otra con los asmoneos. Ninguna de ellas pasó de 80 años. Yo me imagino que Ben Gurión en este momento diría, me lo imagino, llegó el momento de la segunda independencia. Tenemos que tomar decisiones críticas para el futuro a nivel interno y a nivel regional con el mundo árabe y con los palestinos, y a nivel de lo que queremos ser cuando seamos grandes. Para que la muerte de estos niños, de estos chicos de 18, 20 años, que él tiene aquí sus biografías, no sea en vano. Para que la muerte de aquellos 1.250 personas asesinadas el 7 de octubre en el sur de Israel, en los kibbutzim, que eran el ADN de David Ben Gurión, que esas personas, sus muertes no sean en vano. Para que las muertes de tantos rehenes que están en manos de Hamas en los túneles de Gaza y que debemos intentar liberar con toda la fuerza, estoy seguro que eso es lo que él nos diría, para que realmente nada de lo que está ocurriendo, de las desgracias que ocurrieron en los últimos meses, sean en vano. Y todo esto exige decisiones. Mira, Nicole, exige una decisión interna. Nosotros tenemos tribus, así le llamó el presidente Rivlin, dentro de Israel. Esas tribus tienen que firmar la paz. Los judíos laicos, los judíos ultraortodoxos, los haredim, que son 12% de la población, han crecido mucho desde que el Estado fue creado y van a seguir creciendo. Los judíos ortodoxos religiosos y los árabes israelíes, árabes palestinos israelíes, que hoy son una parte íntegra de la sociedad. Y como él escribió aquí, tienen derechos similares a los de los judíos según la Magna Carta israelí, que es la Declaración de Independencia, en la que Ben Gurión, ese documento extraordinario que tiene que ser la base, en mi opinión, de nuestra futura Constitución. Israel, con 76 años, tiene que empezar a trabajar en una Constitución que sean las reglas del juego de todos nosotros, que permitan buscar el denominador común entre esas 4 tribus, a la que añado una quinta, la diáspora judía. 8 millones de judíos de la diáspora. Estas 5 tribus tienen que determinar qué denominador tenemos en común para las futuras generaciones. Porque somos un pueblo muy pequeño. Hoy por hoy en el mundo hay 2.400 millones de cristianos. Hay casi 2.000 millones de musulmanes y nosotros somos un poco más de 15 millones. Perdimos 1/3 de nuestro pueblo en el Holocausto. 1/3. Es mucho. Esto hay que recuperarlo y hay que pensar qué tenemos en común. Tenemos muchas diferencias, pero tenemos también muchas cosas en común. Y Ben Gurión lo sabía. Y para hacer una constitución hay que hacerlo ahora. De la misma manera, Nicole, somos el único país del mundo que no tiene aún fronteras reconocidas. Llegó el momento de que decidamos cuáles son nuestras fronteras en todos los frentes, no solamente con Egipto, con Jordania, con quien ya firmamos la paz, tenemos también que cerrar nuestras fronteras con los palestinos, manteniendo una mayoría, lo que es la herencia de Ben Gurión, una mayoría judía dentro del país. Para eso hemos venido tú y yo a este país, como 3,5 millones de judíos que lo hicieron, claro, que es uno de los grandes logros. No hay ningún país del mundo que haya absorbido a tal cifra de personas, pero al mismo tiempo el régimen democrático que Ben Gurión insistió en tener. Somos la única democracia de Oriente Medio. Sin embargo, se logró mantener esta democracia, a veces a duras penas, porque en un país que está en guerra no es fácil. Y además tenemos un sistema democrático que Ben Gurión implantó, proporcional, que era muy correcto en los primeros años del Estado, porque la idea era dar representación parlamentaria a todos los grupos, que nadie se quede en la calle. Pero hoy en día, eso convirtió el Parlamento en un cristal roto, un cristal roto que cada vez se rompe más y que no hay manera de hacer una coalición, de crear algo que permita gobernar. Hoy el gran logro es que Israel tiene las fuerzas militares más poderosas entre Indonesia y Gibraltar. Así me lo dijo el jefe de la inteligencia saudí. Es un hombre que conoce bien, el príncipe Turki el Faisal. Y le creo, es verdad. Israel es el país más fuerte en un radio de 2.000 kilómetros. Pero no basta con fuerza militar. Y esto Ben Gurión lo sabía. Las bases de un Estado con un pueblo que tiene una resiliencia, una resistencia. Lo vemos ahora a raíz del 7 de octubre, que yo no encuentro en ningún país de Occidente. Somos a veces bastante insoportables, porque somos un poco bipolares. Pasamos del estado de euforia al estado de depresión con demasiada facilidad.
Un comienzo como Estado, como nación y como sentimiento judío.
La polémica, la discusión interna es parte de nuestro ADN. Del pueblo judío. Viene del Talmud, viene de tantas cosas más. Somos uno de los pueblos más antiguos, si no el pueblo más antiguo de la tierra. Hace más de 3.000 años, el rey David declaró Jerusalén capital. Dime tú un solo país del mundo cuya capital haya sido determinada hace 3 milenios. No existe. Entonces hay una polémica interna que es parte de nuestra fuerza, no es una debilidad. Es positivo, en mi opinión, siempre que no lo llevamos demasiado lejos. Y eso es algo que por eso creo que tenemos que definir entre nosotros qué es lo que hay en común dentro del pueblo de Israel, y me refiero al pueblo de Israel en el Estado de Israel y en la diáspora. ¿Qué tenemos en común? Y ese común hay que pasarlo a las próximas generaciones.
Enrique, tú estás sentado en la silla de Ben Gurión y yo creo que él jamás hubiese pensado las alianzas después de todos los años que se ha hecho en el mundo árabe musulmán con Arabia Saudita.
Si Ben Gurión levantara cabeza y viera esta paradoja, que significa que los países árabes que atacaron Israel en el 48 son hoy los aliados potenciales de Israel, y en cambio los países con los que Ben Gurión hizo una alianza, Irán, Turquía, son hoy países rivales de Israel, se quedaría muy sorprendido. Es extraordinariamente importante, Nicole, que logremos la paz con Arabia Saudita, porque eso nos puede abrir parte del mundo árabe y del mundo musulmán, sus puertas, y porque puede ser el final de la guerra de 1300 años entre la civilización judía y la civilización islámica, y también porque eso nos puede ayudar a resolver quizás la herida más sangrienta que tenemos, y quizás no inmediatamente, quizás en el futuro solamente, el problema palestino. En un país como Israel, quien no cree en milagros no es realista.
Estamos en el salón de la biblioteca de David Ben Gurión. El olor de los libros, 20.000 libros hay aquí. Su cuarto está al lado, dormía y yo creo que se levantaba y leía. ¿Cuánto medía él?
1,52 m.
Napoleón era también bajito. Simón Bolívar, el libertador de América, era bajito. Estos líderes bajitos en tamaño, pero grandes como personas.
Yo creo que David Ben Gurión es un gigante. Y creo que es un hombre que tuvo una visión que va mucho más allá del tiempo. Tenía sus problemas también, tenía sus defectos también. Era un hombre a veces demasiado obstinado. A veces ponía sus principios a tal altura que perdió ciertas cosas en el camino. Pero es el hombre, para mí, me atrevo a decir, uno de los principales líderes de la historia judía, si no el principal líder. Yo creo, Nicole, que sin Ben Gurión probablemente nadie se hubiese atrevido a declarar el Estado. Porque fíjate tú la situación que él tenía en el 48. Él llegó aquí en 1906, tenía 20 años, y llegó en un barco medio destrozado ruso, consiguió llegar a Israel. Llega con sus amigos del grupo Ezra, que hablaban hebreo entre ellos en Plonsk, en Polonia, que estudiaban cómo sería el futuro Estado judío de Israel. Se enfadaron muchísimo cuando Herzl quiso crear el Estado judío en Uganda. Y les dijeron, no, Eretz Israel es nuestra tierra, es nuestra cuna. Es allí que el rey David declaró la independencia hace casi 3 milenios. Tenemos que volver allí. Y llega aquí y no tienen dónde llevarle. Le llevan a algún lugar, a Petah Tikva, y se convierte en uno de los líderes principales del Yishuv, de lo que era la situación pre-Estado. Pero luego imagínate tú, en mayo del 48, la decisión de escribir la Declaración de Independencia, sabiendo que el día 15, sábado, los británicos se van, y el día 14 hay 2 eventos históricos. Uno, la Declaración de Independencia antes de Shabbat, donde se lee la Magna Carta israelí, escrita esos días, rectificada hasta el último momento, y Ben Gurión lo lee y declara la independencia de Israel. Y en otro lugar, Sir Henry Gurney, que era el último Chief Secretary, secretario del mandato británico, convoca una rueda de prensa y dice, no tenemos a quién entregar los poderes porque los judíos y los árabes están enfrentados, así que vamos a dejar la llave debajo de la alfombrita al lado de la puerta. Otro gran logro de Ben Gurión. Él casi provocó una guerra civil para que hubiese un solo tzahal, un solo ejército, una sola fuerza. Y se enfrentó a la élite del Palmaj, que era de su familia política, y se enfrentó al Etzel, que era de Menachem Begin, de la derecha, y los desmanteló y les disparó y mató judíos que llegaron en un barco con armas en Altalena. O sea, él se arriesga a una guerra civil bajo la concepción y el entendimiento que hace falta tener una sola fuerza. Declara elecciones porque dice que la democracia es lo más importante y que hay que ir adelante con un sistema democrático, pase lo que pase. Y además, al igual que el rey David, declara Jerusalén la capital de Israel, aunque según la decisión de partición que Israel aceptó y los árabes rechazaron, Jerusalén era una ciudad internacional. Y él tuvo la visión de declarar ya entonces la ciudad santa de Jerusalén como la capital de Israel. Tú sabes que yo tengo el privilegio de trabajar con el Papa Francisco y cuando él me pregunta cuál es el mayor logro de Israel, yo le digo que en mi opinión es el resucitar del hebreo. Y le dije, es como si usted, Papa Francisco, mañana decidiera que el latín sea el idioma que se hable en las transmisiones de fútbol, en los insultos de las redes sociales, en los parvularios, en las universidades. ¿Se lo imagina? Y me mira y dice, no me lo imagino en absoluto. Pues eso es lo que pasó con el hebreo, que es para mí, a nivel sociológico, el mayor o el logro más sorprendente del pueblo judío en el siglo XX.
¿Y cuál fue el primer tratado de comercio? Porque tú tienes esa historia, Enrique. El primer tratado de comercio que hubo entre Israel y Argentina. Un poco para ver cómo era la época, que hoy en día somos la Startup Nation y es otro...
Argentina era uno de los países más ricos del mundo. Y Evita Perón estaba muy preocupada por el futuro de Israel después del Holocausto y llevó a Yitzhak Navon, el secretario de Ben Gurión, se lo llevó era diplomático y se lo llevó a Juan Perón para convencerle a comprar algo al nuevo Estado de Israel. Y Juan Perón le preguntaba, ¿y qué? Y él decía, ¿naranjas? No, hasta que lleguen aquí ya estarán podridas. Y Evita, pero es muy importante que lo compres, que les ayudes, ellos tienen que sobrevivir. Ah, tenemos una fábrica nueva de dentaduras. Y dijo, pues mándame 25.000. Y esta fue la primera compra, según Avon, de Argentina en Israel. Imagínate que hoy en día Israel tiene mucho que proponer a Argentina y al resto del mundo.
Hoy en día tiene que proponer uno de los, yo creo, de la exportación más importante que tiene este país, que es su Startup Nation. Crees en la Startup Regional, o sea, en el desarrollo de la región de Medio Oriente y también del aporte que tiene Israel al mundo para exportar ya no 25.000 dentaduras, sino exportar todo este potencial.
Israel, el motivo por el cual se firmaron los acuerdos de Abraham y por el cual algún día firmaremos la paz con Arabia Saudita, es porque tenemos enemigos comunes, porque tenemos un poderío militar que ellos llegaron a la conclusión que no pueden superar por la vía de la guerra, al menos en las próximas generaciones, y porque somos la Startup Nation y ellos quieren gozar de esa tecnología. Todo esto que vemos aquí, esta Am HaSefer, el pueblo del libro, que sigamos siendo el pueblo del libro, quizás también el pueblo de los chips, porque toda la informática y toda la inteligencia artificial será el nuevo high-tech en el futuro, pero las bases de todo esto están en estos libros, en esta biblioteca que Ben Gurión tenía.
En la biblioteca hay todo un sector de libros en español.
Él quiso aprender español para poder leer el Quijote en versión original.
Increíble.
Cervantes se justifica, pero aprendió griego para leer sobre Aristóteles y Platón. Él hablaba 11 idiomas. 20 capítulos sobre periodismo.
Oye.
Obsequio del Ministerio de Cultura del Salvador.
¿Del Salvador?
Un libro de 1961, Filosofía y Poesía del Lenguaje, publicado en Brasil.
A ver.
A su excelencia David Ben Gurión, primer ministro del Estado de Israel, homenaje, José Francisco, ¿qué dice aquí?
Euco.
Encao.
De Río de Janeiro.
Marzo 61, Brasil. Y le enviaron es este, José Arraez de Alencar.
Estamos en el cuarto de David Ben Gurión, Enrique, donde seguramente soñaba. Era él, el ser humano, que somos cualquiera de nosotros. Todos soñamos. Y él soñó con un Israel.
Mira esto.
Sí. Esta era la cama.
Este era el colchón de David Ben Gurión.
El colchón de David Ben Gurión. O sea, el padre de este país.
Esto se llama en Israel Mitat Sochnut, una cama de la Sochnut, de la agencia judía. Y Ben Gurión por elección vivía así. Tenía un armario más o menos de su altura, 1,52 m. Tenía un libro, una Biblia aquí, un Tanaj. Y tenía una radio que le conectaba con el mundo.
Pero con tan poco lo que se puede hacer en la vida, Enrique.
Él vivía auténticamente como de una forma espartana. Lo importante para él no eran las condiciones y la opulencia, sino que eran los libros. Yo creo que 2/3 de su casa son libros, 20.000 libros, donde realmente él, hasta su despachito, tú ves, todos son libros, montañas de libros.
Su esposa dormía abajo, Pola. Ella lo dejaba a él porque él estaba concentrado en ese mundo que era él, tan particular.
Él estuvo con Pola 50 años.
Sí.
Es verdad que él tenía su propio mundo también, pero él sin Pola no hubiese podido estar en el mundo material, el mundo en que hace falta tomar decisiones, decidir qué hacen los hijos. Él realmente, Pola era la mujer, la jefa de operaciones.
Un hombre con anécdotas maravillosas. Hay una que tú sabes, que a mí me encanta. La de Kennedy, por favor, cuéntanos.
En 1961, John F. Kennedy ganó las elecciones. Aparentemente en parte gracias al apoyo del voto judío en Estados Unidos. Y Ben Gurion fue a ver a Kennedy junto con Shimon Peres y estaban los tres en el ascensor del hotel Waldorf Astoria en Nueva York. Ahora, imagínate la diferencia de alturas.
¿Cuánto medía Kennedy?
1,85 y Ben Gurion medía 1,52. Nuestro Napoleón, nuestro pequeño gran hombre.
Exacto.
Y le dice Kennedy a Ben Gurion, primer ministro, le quiero agradecer porque gracias al apoyo de la comunidad judía yo gané las elecciones. Dígame qué puedo hacer por ustedes. Y Ben Gurion le mira hacia arriba y le dice, con mucho gusto, sea usted un gran presidente de los Estados Unidos de América.
Podemos seguir soñando, Enrique.
Siempre.
Sí. ¿Y los sueños se hacen realidad?
Eso es algo que yo, no todos, pero si dejamos de soñar, renunciamos a ello. Mi madre decía siempre, en paz descanse, el no ya lo tienes.
¿Cómo se llamaba tu mamá?
Cota Benarroz. Y me decía siempre, sigue soñando, sigue poniéndote objetivos, que algunos de ellos los vas a lograr. Yo creo que eso es verdad para el Estado de Israel. Y creo que es verdad para esta generación de soñadores, como el hombre que dormía en esta cama, Ben Gurion, y también como su principal estudiante, que veía en él un mentor, Shimon Peres, que fue un poco su continuación años después.
Hasta aquí nuestra emisión de hoy a través del QR. Nos gustaría saber desde dónde nos ven. Desde nuestros estudios en Tel Aviv de i24 News. Gracias, como siempre, por estar con nosotros. Será hasta la próxima.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? la necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. The headlines this hour. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu set to meet with US President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris in Washington. He will be kingmaker, but never the king. Palestinians react to reports that Mohammed Dahlan is favoured to take over in Gaza. And Russia's Vladimir Putin hosts the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad amid signs of a rapprochement between Syria and Turkey. But first, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is meeting both US President Joe Biden and his Vice President Kamala Harris at the White House tonight. Harris is also now the Democratic Party's presumptive nominee. The meeting follows Netanyahu's speech to Congress last night, in which he asserted that the enemies of Israel and the enemies of the United States were one and the same. Our Bianca Zanini has this report.
America and Israel must stand together because when we stand together, something very simple happens. We win, they lose. And my friends, I came to assure you today of one thing: we will win.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a fiery speech at the U.S. Congress Wednesday evening, a record fourth speech by a foreign leader to a joint Congress, receiving a 1-minute standing ovation before even uttering a word, and then at least another 50 rounds of applause throughout the speech. Netanyahu spoke of the horrors of October 7th and praised the hostages who were safely returned home and the Israeli soldiers fighting against Hamas terrorists. He spoke of unity between America and Israel and the need to forge a security alliance in the Middle East to counter Iran.
Iran is virtually behind all the terrorism, all the turmoil, all the chaos, all the killing. My friends, if you remember one thing from the speech, remember this: our enemies are your enemies. Our fight is your fight. And our victory will be your victory.
Netanyahu thanked America for its support and asked to fast-track military aid so Israel can finish its job faster. But despite the applause, Netanyahu's visit was marred by controversy. Outside the capital, thousands took to the streets to protest.
I want to be part of a historic movement to stop the genocide, stop the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, to show solidarity.
Some protests even turning violent, with police using pepper spray. One pro-Palestinian demonstrator spray-painted a message in support of Hamas.
Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Netanyahu dismissed criticism of the war in Gaza, claiming that almost no civilians were killed in the latest operation in Rafah, but didn't mention the overall number of almost 40,000 people killed in Gaza since the war began. Although Netanyahu spoke to a crowd of allies and supporters, it wasn't a full house. Around 70 members of Congress, almost all of them Democrats, decided to boycott the speech. Others, like Democratic Representative Rashida Tlaib, held a sign with the words "war criminal." 3 family members of hostages held in Gaza were escorted out while wearing T-shirts written "Seal the Deal," referring to the ceasefire for hostages deal currently being negotiated between Israel and Hamas, a deal many had hoped Netanyahu would address.
Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza, but for the foreseeable future, we must retain overriding security control there to prevent the resurgence of terror, to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
The immediate response from Hamas was that, quote, the speech shows Netanyahu does not want to conclude the ceasefire deal.
Well, in a few moments, we'll head to Washington, D.C. To talk a bit more about Prime Minister Netanyahu's meeting tonight with President Biden and Vice President Harris. But with me in the studio this hour, Eran Lahav is a senior researcher for global terrorism and Iran proxy organisations at the IDSF. Good to have you with us, Eran. Thank you for joining us. So the speech last night did focus very much on Iran and the threat that Iran poses, not just to Israel, but other countries around the world. Do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu did enough to win over some sceptical senators there?
I think, yeah, indeed. I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, what he did, he managed to convey a direct message that Israel and other Western countries are on the same boat as it comes to the threat from Iran's side. And we need to understand when Iran threats Israel, it affects the rest of the world. And Israel in Iran's strategy is just the first phase.
Okay, all right, Arad, for now, stay with us. We're going to go to Washington, D.C. now. We're joined by our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. So, Mike, Benjamin Netanyahu finally got that invitation to the White House, didn't he? Although not quite under the circumstances he expected, perhaps.
No, if you'll recall, it seems like ancient history now. Prior to October 7th, there was a countdown of how long it was until the Prime Minister would receive the coveted invitation here to the Oval Office. It had been so long into the Biden tenure here in the White House, and Netanyahu didn't receive the invitation. They met on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York a few weeks prior to October 7th. It was almost seen as a setback to Prime Minister Netanyahu that he just couldn't get into the Oval Office once again. Well, here he is in a post-October 7th world. He's isolated diplomatically, politically. Obviously, you've seen the polls over the last few months, and they haven't gotten much better in time. That's on the Israeli side. On the American side, well, obviously things have taken a turn here in Washington over the last few days. Joe Biden is now a lame duck. But on the flip side of that, well, it means he doesn't have to worry about electoral concerns much anymore. And generally speaking, when Prime Minister Netanyahu has departed Washington and flown back to Jerusalem, there are always those leaks to the media saying, well, we told the American president what's what and who's who. I'm not sure if the prime minister's really in a position to do that this time around. There'll be talk about Iran, of course, as there any time is when there's a meeting between Israeli and American leadership, no matter what the level is. Obviously, though, a big focus will be on finally securing a hostage deal and a ceasefire. A senior Biden administration official speaking to reporters after Netanyahu's speech yesterday said the essential framework of a deal is in place, but the devil is always in the details, and the implementation of phase 1, phase 2, and so forth still needs to be worked through. Asked whether Netanyahu is the one holding up a deal, the administration official said that's not under consideration right now. The Israelis have, quote unquote, put a lot on the table in terms of concessions, and a deal is closable, in the words of that official.
And Netanyahu will, of course, also be meeting with Vice President and Democratic presumptive nominee Kamala Harris. She's given, or her office has given, a few clues just as to how that meeting might go later, Mike.
Well, you know, this is really going to be almost a get-to-know-you meeting. Biden and Netanyahu go back decades, as they say ad nauseum. 40 years now they've known each other. There's really no surprises there. But with Netanyahu and Harris, there's little history. And, of course, so much about politics is based on personal history and personal relationships, especially when you're dealing with foreign policy. Harris has essentially mimicked Biden in the response post-October 7th. Some of the criticism from the vice president's office has gotten out ahead of the Oval Office Hamas itself, but for the most part, they've been aligned in both their praise, their sympathies, and their criticisms of the Israeli government and Netanyahu in particular. But again, Harris now the presumed front runner, actually the presumed nominee at this point for the Democratic ticket. And so this is a much more important meeting than it was just, 72 hours ago in terms of the Harris-Netanyahu relationship.
And the Prime Minister will be rounding off his trip in Florida, where he'll be meeting former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, that should be interesting in Mar-a-Lago tomorrow morning. Netanyahu and Trump obviously had what some would term a bromance throughout the course of the Trump White House. It faltered in the end, as many romances do, with some harsh words being sent across the way by Donald Trump in the aftermath of Netanyahu's belated congratulations to President Biden for winning the election. There were also some other tensions that were released afterward in terms of some events that occurred in the later days of the Trump administration. Both Trump and Netanyahu, according to those in the know and who have kept in touch with both of them, say the past is the past. They can have a fruitful relationship once again should Trump come back to the White House in January.
Mike, thank you very much indeed. Mike Wagenheim there in Washington. Well, Israel's foreign minister says that he has warned his French counterpart of an Iranian-linked plan to disrupt the Olympic Games. The alleged plot comes on the back of heightened security surrounding the Israeli delegation, given tensions stemming from the war with Hamas. With more, our correspondent Robert Swift.
There are those who seek to undermine the celebratory nature of this joyous event. Israel's Foreign Minister, Israel Katz, wrote to his French counterpart, warning of an alleged Iranian-backed plot to target Israeli Olympians. According to Israeli intelligence assessments, Iranian proxies may target Israeli Olympians or tourists during the Games in France.
After October 7, it is a bit terrifying that something similar like what happened there could happen here. But life doesn't just stop, we go on.
Israel's foreign ministry has not declassified and published any intelligence to back up its claim, as the US has on occasion begun doing to reinforce its positions. Meanwhile, Israel's soccer team kicked off their opening match against Mali, drawing 0-0.
I don't like football at all. I'm just coming here to support Israeli team, just for that.
Like the rest of Israel's delegation, the Olympic soccer team is operating in France under heavy security, provided by French authorities and the Shin Bet. This year's games take place 5 decades after 11 Israeli athletes were killed by Palestinians at the 1972 Munich Olympics. Tensions related to the ongoing war in Israel and Gaza have led to enhanced security and heightened tensions. 6 Palestinian athletes are competing in the Games, with many keen to use the platform as an opportunity to highlight their people's plight.
We're with the people of Gaza. My family is there. I have so many friends there, and it's just, we're here for so much more than just competing. We're here to represent our country and to fight for our country in a very peaceful way.
In Gaza, 300 athletes have died and all sports facilities have been destroyed since October the 7th, Palestinian sports officials say. And the Games go.
Well, to talk more about that, with me in the studio, Eran Lahav, and joining us from the US, Jason Brodsky is the policy director of the group United Against a Nuclear Iran. Welcome to you, Jason. And this is exactly what Prime Minister Netanyahu was warning about last night, wasn't it? That the threat from Iran is not focused solely on Israel. It is a threat to the world.
It's great to be with you, Laura. Yes, I agree. This is what he was warning about last night. And I think that this latest reporting about plots against Israeli athletes participating in the Olympics is really a function of the lack of deterrence or the eroded deterrence that the West has vis-a-vis Iran. And we're seeing it also in the United States with the Iranian plot to assassinate the Republican nominee for president of the United States. That's a shocking development, but not a surprising one. So I think that we have a deterrence problem with respect to the Islamic Republic that needs to be solved quickly in order to save lives.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Eran, do you agree with that? Is this a deterrence issue?
Absolutely. And it's not surprising because Iran is this is like a continuing campaign that Iran is doing. On one hand, they do it diplomatically. They try to boycott the participation of Israel in the Olympics. They were trying to do it also on social media, and also lots of advertisement about this, how to boycott Israel and they should not participate in the Olympics. And on the other hand, there's ongoing activity with its proxies, for example, Hezbollah in Europe. And we see also that in Germany lately, they've been a raid on the Islamic Center, which is the second raid in Hamburg, which is Iranian Shiite center in Hamburg, which is trying to influence the Shiite community and infiltrate also Hezbollah activists in Europe in order to target also Jewish targets and also Israeli targets and institute in Europe. So this is totally not surprising, totally agree.
And Jason, on that series of raids in Germany yesterday, several German cities, Frankfurt, Munich, Hamburg among them, Iran has summoned the German ambassador to talk about that. Do you think they were expecting that?
I think that the Iranians have long been suspecting German activity to increase against the Islamic Center of Hamburg. My organization, United Against Nuclear Iran, was very proud to have provided information to the German authorities, specifically the German Interior Ministry, about radicalization happening in the Islamic Center of Hamburg, particularly with partnerships with Hezbollah-linked entities like the University of Religions and Denominations. Let's not forget the Islamic Center of Hamburg hosted Ali Reza Arafi, who's a member of the Guardian Council in the Islamic Republic and the former the chairman of the Al-Mustafa International University, which is under counterterrorism sanctions in the United States for its recruitment of students to be used for Quds Force intelligence purposes. So this is a very serious security concern. And by the way, we should be hopefully seeing the same scenes that occurred in Germany yesterday at Khamenei's representative offices around Europe, because they are all following the same radicalization blueprint.
Thank you, Jason. Iran, do you see any sign that the Europeans are ready to do that? They have, of course, stopped short of listing the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, as a terrorist organization.
Yeah, indeed. I think not all European countries are actually aware of it, or at least do not really understand also what the terms about a jihad war against, or jihad warfare would say. I would also want to add that this specifically center in Hamburg, the imam of this center is in contact with Ali Sistani, which is the main cleric of the Shiite community in Iraq, and also related to a very dangerous terrorist organization in Iraq, which is also pro-Iranian. It's called Hashad al-Sha'bi. And we can see how it's related to Iran. I don't know if every European country is really aware of this. Germany is doing some significant acts in the last years, but I think the Western world is not totally awake.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Aaron. Jason, I just want to bring it back to the US before you go. I mean, Netanyahu made the point about the protesters that we've seen on American streets in recent months. He said they were Iran's useful idiots, and almost as if they were trying to prove his point, we saw horrific scenes of people burning American flags on the streets of the Capitol.
Laura, I was reminded of some of the scenes occurring in Washington, D.C., where I live. It looked like it was happening in Tehran during Quds Day marches over there. And I would point to you to a leaked document that surfaced a few months ago from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Intelligence Organization's head, ordering the IRGC's intelligence organization to provide resources and all assistance that's necessary to some of these protests in the West. And so the Islamic Republic has long eyed this movement that's happening in the West as fertile ground for infiltration and influence operations. The Director of National Intelligence disclosed that the Islamic Republic has started paying some of these protesters. And so this is a very serious concern, but we need to hear more from the U.S. government as to not only it monitoring these developments, but what is it going to do about it to thwart this kind of interference in our democracy.
Jason, thank you very much. Jason Brodsky there at United Against a Nuclear Iran. Now, the IDF has revealed details about the operation to recover the bodies of 5 Israeli hostages from Gaza. They were found in a tunnel in the central city of Khan Yunis. Here's the IDF spokesman, Daniel Hagari, speaking just a short while ago.
The Hamas terror organization abducted our hostages into their tunnels, 20 meters below the city of Khan Yunis. This was underneath an area that was previously designated as a humanitarian area by the IDF, an area for Gazan civilians to move away from the battlefield and receive humanitarian aid and shelter. Hamas exploited the humanitarian area and used it to hold our hostage captive.
Well, with more on that now, here's our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran.
A final farewell prayer for 5 slain hostages. The IDF and Shin Bet recovered the bodies of 5 Israeli hostages killed by Hamas-led terrorists on October 7th and taken to Gaza. They were identified as Maya Goren, 56, and Ravid Katz, 51, from Kibbutz Nir Oz, IDF Staff Sergeant in the reserves Oren Goldin from Kibbutz Nir Yitzchak, Staff Sergeant Tomer Achimas, and Sergeant Kirill Brodsky. All 5 were previously declared dead by Israel, with their remains located in a tunnel in Khan Yunis on Wednesday.
This was an operation guided by Shin Bet Intelligence and the Intelligence Directorate of the IDF, forces of the Commando Brigade, Egaz Unit, Yahalom Unit, Combat Engineering Troops, and a company from the 7th Brigade raided an underground compound in Khan Yunis.
The hostages were being held below an area that was previously designated as a humanitarian area, in a tunnel roughly 200 meters long and 20 meters deep, with several rooms where the hostages were located.
It's hard to describe in words what an operation of this kind feels like. The sense of responsibility, the importance of the task. Everything boils down to one moment when you realize you've arrived at the right place. I know that hundreds of people are responsible for discovering the location of the bodies. Bringing back the hostages, whether alive or dead, this is our life's mission.
According to the IDF, Shin Bet interrogations of detained terrorists helped the forces zero in on the precise tunnel in Khan Yunis where the bodies were hidden. Prior to the operation, the forces did not know which bodies were involved, and their identities were only discovered through forensic examination. The IDF says recovering the hostages' bodies was one of the main objectives of its current operation in the southern Gaza city.
Today is a horrible feeling. Yesterday, they retrieved the bodies of 5 hostages. These are families that I love very much. We've become close friends over these past 290-something days. The pain is deep for all of us, not just the families.
Meanwhile, an IDF reservist who filmed and circulated a video showing the recovery of the bodies prior to the families being notified was permanently dismissed from reserve duty. He's set to be jailed for 10 days. Following the retrieval of the 5 hostages, there are currently 115 hostages still held in the Gaza Strip, including 41 who have been declared dead. And the families of the hostages are warning that their time is running out.
Well, joining us now, Amir Al-Fassa is the nephew of Maya Goren, and Maya and her husband Avner were both murdered by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. Maya's body was kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Oz and has just been recovered by the IDF. Amir, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Our condolences for your loss and to your family. Tragically, you already knew, didn't you, that Maya was no longer alive. Do you have a sense of relief, at least, that her body is being brought back to Israel for a proper burial?
Thank you very much. Yes, we have some relief, but we have a lot of mixed feelings in this 24 hours that goes. It's with a lot of sadness. And the fact that now our personal journey is kind of got into an end. We really wanted Maya to come back to Israel to bury her next to Avner, and we shouted it in every way we can this past more than 9 months. But I personally feel that the big mission is still there to bring everyone else home. And I know that I personally will be there in the streets, in the world, to shout it.
So, yeah.
Israel people will come back.
So 115 people, of course, still being held in Gaza. Your aunt, you have 4 cousins. Your aunt had 4 children who are now all orphans. Does this bring a sense of closure for them? Will they be able to continue with their lives, albeit still in grief?
Can you repeat it again? I didn't hear you.
Your cousins, Maya's 4 children, are now, of course, tragically orphans, but now they can bury their parents, as you say, side by side. Will they be able to move on with their lives a bit more now?
Yes, kind of. You know, we have a lot of they have a lot of process to make, so it's hard to say now what will happen. Only tomorrow we have a funeral for Maya, and we are our family. My mother is Avner's sister, and me and my brothers and my brother and sister and my father, we will be there for them. I know it won't be easy. So I know that they are strong. There are 4 really strong people: Asif, Bar, Gal, and Dekel. And I know it will be tough, but we will be there for them in every way, in everything they will need. Kibbutz Nir Oz, it's a community that is now broken because of all of the lost people of there, the murdered people and the kidnapped people, but it's still a community that also will hug them in this process.
Well, Maya was, it sounds like she was very much a mother figure in the kibbutz. She had 4 of her own children. She was also a kindergarten teacher. And we've got this now famous photograph of her cradling baby Kfir Bibas, who is himself still a hostage in Gaza. Just how would you like your aunt, Maya, to be remembered?
Maya, like you said, she was a mom, and she cared a lot of the people around her, the family, the babies she took care of, the parents of them. She was really dedicated, and she was a giving person. She was giving for herself a lot to the other people around her. And we will remember her as this person, the one who cared for each other a lot, put the others before herself, and this is what will make us now help the other people that wants their loved one to come back. The ones that they want to bury them. There are now 41 people that was murdered and are still in Gaza, and the other one are 74 people that were alive, and we need them to come back as soon as possible before it will be too late. Lately, we heard about 2 hostages that was murdered in captivity, so the time is running out, and we need to do anything to bring them home, like Maya would do if she was alive.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Amir. May the memories of Maya and Avner be a blessing. We hope your family can move on somewhat from this horrific situation. Amir Al-Fassa, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, time for a short break. When we come back, we'll head to the north of Israel, where the attacks from the Lebanese group Hezbollah continue. More on that next. Welcome back. The Palestinian businessman Mohammed Dahlan has reacted to reports that he's being touted as a possible future leader in Gaza. Dahlan, who is a rival of the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, wrote on social media that he would not support any choice that has not been reached based on Palestinian national understandings. He also referred to the war in Gaza as an ongoing genocide. We'll hear to talk more about that our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran. Ariel, it's 17 years since Mohammed Dahlan had to flee Gaza. People are now talking about him as a possible leader to come back and rule the Strip.
Right, so he fled Gaza following the ascension to power of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And like many Fatah officials, he left. The ones who didn't were either brutally killed or worse, if there can be such a thing. But really, with these talks about who will assume responsibility over the Gaza Strip the day after the war, the question, and Israel denying that both Hamas or the PA will be able to assume that role. So the question is, who is this moderate Palestinian who doesn't want the destruction of Israel, who could take this position? Now, this Dahlan's name has been touted, as you mentioned, and following his denial, we reached out to sources close to Dahlan, who currently resides in the UAE, and while they did confirm Dahlan's denial that he has no interest in assuming an official role in the Palestinian Authority, they did say that Dahlan, quote, will be the kingmaker but not the king, meaning that his strongman position in the Fatah remains, and he wants to use that to kind of form the next phase of leadership in the PA.
But not necessarily.
He doesn't want the role. He wants to be responsible for the person who takes that role.
But there are reports that he does want to come back to Gaza. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in the UAE.
Look, he denied that he wants any official position. So according to what this source is saying, let's add a few more quotes. He's in another league with a master view over things, but will not take an official position. So I think he's trying to position himself as the man behind the scenes, again, the kingmaker, but not the person in the forefront who has to deal with all this pressure. The person who the sources close to Dahlan has the most likelihood of assuming that position is a former foreign minister of the PA, Nasser al-Kidwa. He also is in exile. He's not in the PA territories. He's in Cairo, to the best of my understanding. Now, Kidwe, that's an interesting possibility because he is not only part of the core of Fatah, but he's also the nephew of Yasser Arafat, the former
so he
first
has a kind of a
president.
kudos.
And so he is accepted, he would be, or could be accepted by all the different Palestinian factions, whereas Dahlan would have heavy opposition in both factions, and any other name would be vetoed by one faction or another. So I think this is interesting because this shows that there is discourse among Palestinian politicians who can assume this role the day after. There's an understanding that Hamas can't be at the top of the leadership, but if there is some form of unity government the day after that Hamas does have a seat at the table calling the shots, that would be a victory for Hamas, because that way they can enjoy from the leadership position of the Palestinians but not have to assume any official responsibility, and all their attention and efforts and time can go to continuing to build their war machine against Israel.
It's an extremely complex situation of conflicting loyalties, isn't it? Thank you very much. Ariel Osseran there. Now, sirens have been blaring across Israel's northern communities today amid a multiple drone attack from across the border in Lebanon. Our Zach Anders is there for us now. Zach, what's happening?
Well, it's been a busy day. Hezbollah claiming responsibility for 9 attacks. We don't have any reports of casualties that have come in. We're still waiting. And I think that there has been some damage, but to communities that are right there on the border that are evacuated. So we don't have any comprehensive damage reports as of yet. Amazing video out today on social media of, again, highlighting what we've been talking about for months, the difficulty of the air defense systems being able to intercept these drones. The air defense missile, ground-to-air missile, appears to initially start heading towards one of the two drones that you see in the video. Now, this is all unconfirmed. This is on social media. We don't have confirmation that these were, in fact, Hezbollah drones. They, at that distance, look like they could also have been Israeli drones. These were large enough to be either or, so we don't know for certain. But in the video, the interceptor missile appears to start heading towards one of these two drones that are flying next to each other, one in front of the other, and then makes a beeline, a U-turn, and heads straight for the ground and explodes. It appears like probably detonated before it hit the ground, but a loud thump, and the person taking the video that's posted on social media dives for cover. It landed near them. Really remarkable stuff, and it highlights again what has been the error, what's been the problem with the drones, the inability to use the current air defense systems capabilities to shoot down these drones. We know within the last week that the IDF is bringing some of their older systems out of storage. If you've ever seen videos online of American ships with their CRAM systems that are the ships that basically shoot thousands of bullets, and you can see it looks like a gold streak across the sky, they're bringing some of those systems out of storage, older systems that are shooting rounds, the ammunition essentially, at these drones, attempting that way to target them and shoot them down. So we know that there's been some changes that have been taking place. We know that Israeli fighter jets have been attempting to shoot these down from the air, air-to-air kills. Really, it's remarkable to see the landscape and how things have changed over the course of this conflict. But one thing is really clear, that the air defense capabilities have been strained and tested by these drones, fatalities coming from these drones. And we don't know for certain either if it's a matter of detection or a matter of current capabilities in being able to shoot these things down, because our sources don't share and won't share where the deficiencies lie and what is the real problem. They don't want to communicate any of that to the other side, obviously. So it's really curious to see what's been developing here. Again, we don't have from today's attacks any reports of casualties, but potential there for some damage from what appears to be multiple drone launches throughout the day. And also some rocket launches as well, but we're still working to confirm some of these details. Really remarkable stuff to watch what's been taking shape, and really remarkable video to be able to see this in action, and underscores the entire problem of this war here in the north.
Zach, thank you very much. Zach Andrews there, up in the north of Israel. Well, with me in the studio this hour, Iran Lahav is a senior researcher for global terrorism and Iran proxy groups at IDSF. And this increased use of drones by Iran's proxies is becoming a real headache for Israel, isn't it?
Definitely. I think this is part of the tendency of Iran, its proxies, to exhaust Israel, and also part of the Iranian strategy to let Hezbollah, which is the, let's say, the closest proxy to Iran, I would say, to try gradually and slowly to get it into the war. And we see now it's being like a limited warfare between Israel and Hezbollah, and they're trying also to humiliate Israel in a way. We saw this surveillance drone that's been used, the Houthi, try to show, okay, we can actually do everything, we can actually see you everywhere. And this is something which is trying to, let's say, drive Israel crazy in that matter. And on the same time, they can use, I mean, Iran, they can, part of the master plan, they can use other proxies at the same time, like the Houthis, for example, or Hamas and the Shiite militias in Iraq.
And we're seeing them coordinate more closely increasingly, aren't we?
Definitely. This is part of the big strategy, which is the unity of the fronts against Israel. This is something that was planned by the Al-Quds Force commander, Qasem Soleimani, the former one, who was eliminated in 2020. This was part of the idea. So they could unify the fronts against Israel and to strangle it in the strangle ring, and from all kind of all directions, also from Hamas, also from Judea and Samaria, with the Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, and from Iraq.
What should Israel do then, long term? Is it futile to just keep having these skirmishes with the various proxy groups?
I mean, we are in this multi-front war, and this is something which will take some time. And of course, from the long term, I think we need to as we already do, we need to hit the main, like the octopus, the Iranian octopus. We need to hit the head of the snake in that matter. And also we need to show some deterrent. So, for example, what Israel did in Yemen, in Hodeidah port, this is also a good message that we also need to change the equation. Also, we need to increase and make it like a much
less
harsher.
defensive and more offensive.
Yeah, more offensive, but also to change the equation that if they will shoot again, we'll have a much harsher reaction. For example, like eliminating one of their officials, the Houthi official, for example. And this is going to be a much stronger message.
Okay, all right, Eran Lahaf, thank you very much indeed. Well, Yemen's Houthis say they will continue to attack Israel even after Israeli jets pounded the port of Hodeidah last week, turning it into a giant fireball. It's almost a week since the group sent an explosive-laden drone over 2,000 kilometers where it hit an apartment in Tel Aviv, killing one person. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined by Catherine Perez-Shakdam. She's the Director of Forward Strategy and an expert on Iran, Yemen and radical movements. Good to see you, Catherine. So that massive strike on Hodeidah apparently wasn't enough to deter the Houthis. They've come out with a statement today saying they will continue.
Yes, I mean, I kind of expecting them to do that. Something that I think hasn't transpired just yet in the media is we took a lot, and I know that they've taken, they claimed the attackers to be their own and that they decided of their own volition to attack Israel, and successfully so, unfortunately. But I think we need to understand that the Houthis, as a militia group, at its core is no more than 5,000 fighters. And that actually, what we witnessed, this attack against Israel, and going as far back as the first attack against Eilat, as well as those attacks that we've seen in the Red Sea, have been carried out by the OSGC. So the OSGC has units in Yemen. We know that to be true. We have data to verify this information. And essentially what you're seeing is an absolute takeover, colonial takeover of the Houthi militia by the OSGC. And the reason being, no one is actually really looking at Yemen. And for many great reasons, the Houthi have been dismissed as this ragtag army type setup. And this is true to some extent, but things have changed dramatically over the past few years, and they have reached capacity. They have managed to acquire weapons that were transferred to them. We know that to be true too, by the OSGC through various channels. And the problem that we're facing today is that we call it the Houthis, but they actually know more. Just that. They are an extension of the OSGC, and you could see that they are actually carrying attacks that are in the benefit of the Islamic Republic of Iran. But the Islamic Republic of Iran is then able to claim that it was the Houthis, that they really had nothing to do with it other than support the effort. And it makes it very convenient for Iran to prevent retaliation on its ground and to once again hide behind a proxy and make sure that those populations, the Yemenis, are the one bearing the brunt of the attack should there be any civilian fallout. And I think it's quite despicable. And it's time for the international community to wake up to this reality and realize that actually, just like with Hamas and Hezbollah, what we're witnessing in Yemen is a takeover of the RSGC of its proxies military.
Well, Catherine, the Saudis, of course, were leading a coalition to fight the Houthis until quite recently. What do you make of the fact that they have just welcomed a deal, the Saudis, between the Yemeni government and the Houthis? It's related to banking, but is this a sign that the Gulf states have kind of seen which way the wind is blowing and have decided that the Houthis are just too much trouble for them to take on?
No. There's something quite interesting about the GCC, and in particular how Saudi Arabia handles its affairs. We need to remember that Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy, and that means that Mohammed bin Salman and his father, King Salman, have the ability to, I would say, remain insulated from many things, and they have the ability to also absorb heat. And so they plan 150 years ahead when we're planning for the next political cycle. And that means that Saudi Arabia is in a position, because of its wealth and its military position, and its ability to acquire tech, to wait it out. And I think what they're trying to do is to create a space by which they are preventing further escalation, at least immediate escalation, waiting to see what the international community is doing. And I think that right now, Mohammed bin Salman, who I think we all know that he's leading the show when it comes to Yemen in particular, is actually waiting for the next administration to come rolling into the White House. And he's waiting out for Trump, but not Trump. We'll see what happens. But he wants to buy himself a few months, because if Trump is indeed ushered into the White House and carry and make good on his promise to retaliate against the Islamic Republic of Iran, or at least to hinder them and their progress, then it means that they don't have to do anything, or that they might join potentially a coalition against the Islamic Republic. So I think it's not to be read as an admission of defeat and an understanding that Israel is losing this war, not at all. I think if anything, Israel is winning this war. The problem is Israel is fighting alone right now, and it is difficult when you are faced with an enemy like the Islamic Republic.
Catherine Perez-Shakdam, thank you very much. Now, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad is meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin in Moscow today. It's being seen as a step towards a reconciliation between Assad and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Assad has so far ruled out meeting Erdogan, who backs the opposition in Syria, unless he agrees to withdraw his troops. Well, for more on that, we're joined by Omar Abu Layla, Executive Director at Deir Ezor 24. Thank you very much for being with us, Omar. Good to see you again. So, Turkish officials, they had to deny reports that Erdogan would be there in person today. But this is a sign, isn't it, that the two leaders are working towards a rapprochement?
Thank you so much, Laura, for having me. Bashar al-Assad and Erdogan going to meet, maybe not today, the meeting between Bashar al-Assad and Putin today, I do believe it's far away from what's going on, or this discussion between Syria and Turkey. It's about the next stage of the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. In my observation or my thoughts, I do believe the Russians call Bashar al-Assad to come to meet him in person from Putin, to tell him that you don't do any stupid movement in the next stage of the conflict. If Israel launched a war against Hezbollah, especially now Netanyahu in the United States, and that's like one of the main things that Putin wanted to discuss it with Bashar al-Assad directly. Also, we heard President Erdogan in the past weeks with his foreign minister and other officials, Turkish officials, they said it publicly that we would like to have or to rebuild the relationship between Syria and Turkey as it's before 2011. So we are not surprised if it happens soon, and we expect this will happen.
Well, Assad has been embraced already, hasn't he, by most of the Arab world. Jordan, one of the countries leading that policy, but Turkey still officially refuses to engage with him. If Turkey does embrace Assad, what will that mean for Syria?
Disaster, to be honest with you. If we talk about one city remain out of Bashar al-Assad control, Idlib, despite it's under the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham control, we talk about millions of civilians who they never agreed to be under Bashar al-Assad control or area. So if Turkey decide to withdraw from Syria, as Bashar al-Assad put one of its conditions or his conditions against Turkey with Turkey, like I would like to meet with Erdogan, but firstly, the Turkish troops should withdraw from the country. Then we talk about Idlib. So the Turkish military points will back to Turkey, and then immediately Russia and Assad will launch a huge military operation against Idlib. And we talk about millions of Syrians, they will be in a huge threat or danger because Bashar al-Assad, its next step will be Idlib. This is one of the things. The other thing is also that, like, if Turkey became one of this coalition with Bashar al-Assad, we talk about Iran, we talk about Bashar al-Assad, Syria, we talk about Russia, and other allies in the region. This is the real danger or threat to Israel as well, because the militia will be more active against other countries, including against Israel.
Right. Well, I wanted to ask you that. I mean, would that be a very dangerous situation for Israel if two sworn enemies of Israel, Assad and Erdogan, made an alliance?
Definitely, Laura. The militia, we remember very well in the beginning of 2017 how they engaged in the Syrian army to fight against Daesh. And when they were just like small groups, and now they are a real threat to the entire region, not only against Israel. We mentioned this in many interviews with you in the past weeks. And what just amazing, and a NATO country like Turkey will be part of with Russia, or alliance with Russia and Syria and Iran. Amazing what a threat coming from the other militia in Syria, because Turkey cannot force these militia to stop threatening other countries like parts and in the ground other countries like Israel. They will be huger or bigger than this period, on this period.
Omar Abu Layla, he's at Deir ez-Zor 24. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Now, the Paris Olympic Games will get underway tomorrow. A huge opening ceremony expected in around 24 hours. The Israeli men's football team were the first Israeli athletes to perform at the Games. And although the Israeli national anthem, the Hatikva, was booed at the opening at the Parc des Princes, the match did pass off peacefully and ended in a 1-1 draw. We're here to talk about that. We're joined by Uri Levy, journalist and founder of Babagol. Great to see you, Uri.
Great to see you.
It's been a while. Everyone's very anxious, aren't they, for the Israeli athletes? I mean, we're really holding our breath as we see them descend into this very, very hostile environment. But the match was okay last night.
Yes, the match was okay, but it's important to put the context. You know, it's the first time since 1976 that Israel sends a football team to the Olympics. So it's quite an historical moment. Plus, we have this collective memory of what happened in 1972. So every time Israel is participating
and remind
in the
the viewers who don't know what happened in 72.
In 72, the Munich massacre, of course, of the Israeli athletes. So it's always there in the background. And to add to the atmosphere, yesterday in the opening game of the Olympic football tournament, the match between Argentina and Morocco was interrupted by crowds crushing into the field, letting the match to end properly, continuing only after 2 hours. So there were some, I would say, some thoughts or some fears that something may happen on the Israel match against Mali, but the Paris police handed in 1,000 policemen for this match. Only 25,000 spectators were present at Parc des Princes, was around 48,000 seats. So it was a high-profile, very much secured event that, although there were jeers and chants in the stands from the Mali fans and pro-Palestinian fans, yes, they did a pretty good job. The match was a little bit disappointing with a 1-1.
Mali are very good, aren't they?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, because the security at this event is off the scale for all the teams, but especially, of course, for the Israeli team. I wanted to ask you, because you were in Qatar covering the World Cup, how do you think the security situation compares?
I think it's very different, and I've just returned from the Euro in Germany, for example, that we've seen also some flaws in the organization and the security and in many senses. I think what Qatar World Cup showed us, that it's very difficult to have a flawless tournament in terms of lack of organizations and lack of security. And a very specific type of countries can serve this kind of, you know...
It helps if you're an authoritarian dictatorship.
Exactly. It's very hard today in democracies, especially in Western Europe, that everything is currently shifting politically, culturally, demographically, and there are a lot of tensions, obviously, when Israel is participating, obviously when it's football, probably the most popular sports in the world, so it adds to the atmosphere and makes it an even bigger challenge. I think that Paris police can handle the situation. They proved it yesterday. Israel have another match in Paris against Paraguay, and the last match is in Nantes. That will be interesting to see against Japan, because I think that the police in other cities, not in Paris, which is the center of events of these Olympics, this will be a real challenge, and let's hope that everything goes through in peace.
All right, well, let's talk about Michaela Moshe on the archery team.
Yes.
She came in a modest number 18, didn't she? But out of 60, I believe.
Yes, a modest start in the round 32 in the archery. But Michaela Moshe is definitely one of the profiles before these Olympics that had high hopes from all the Israeli delegation. It's starting slow, we'll say. But I think that in the other subjects, in the other fields, Israel has big hopes for at least 4 or 5 medals in these Olympics. If we are speaking about the windsurfing, for example, Sharon Cantor is a world champion, can do something interesting. Obviously, Artyom
And that will be on the Seine, will it?
Yes.
That'll be interesting.
And Artyom Dolgobiach is a gold medalist from Tokyo. If he's healthy, I think he's also a good prospect for a medal. 4 to 5 medals would be a great success for Israel here.
What other sports is Israel hoping to get?
Israel is participating, obviously, in all the track and field professions. You have Blessing Afirfa and Maur Turi and Luna Chamtai Salpeter that is participating in the marathon for women. And I think that in general, Israel sent 88 athletes to these games. It's not the biggest, but it's certainly respectable. They're going to compete in 18 different sports. So,
judo?
Yeah.
Any hopes in judo?
Of course, 12 competitors in the judo. We have also we have a big tradition in judo. We remember Oren Smadja, Yael Arad, all won medals in Barcelona. Also Ori Sasson, Arik Zehevi. Yes, we remember them. So every Olympic, judo is our sport.
All right, we wish them all the best. It's really nerve-wracking watching them, but good luck to the whole team. Uri, thank you. Great to see you as always. Uri Levy there from Babagol. That's it for tonight's show. Do stay with us on I24 News. Khalid Ben David is up next with tonight's rundown. Good night.
days after his congressional address and yesterday's meeting with President Biden, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been having a closed-door meeting with Donald Trump at his Mar-a-Lago estate. We'll have more details on that. Italy reappointing an ambassador to Syria for the first time in 12 years. We'll have more explanation as to that decision. And let the games begin. A spectacular and unique opening ceremony of the 2024 Olympic Games in Paris a short while ago. Hello and welcome to I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Our top story, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is still in Washington with a packed schedule from addressing Congress to meetings with President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, and former President Trump. I-24's Lynn Plogmeyer has more on the Prime Minister's visit.
Democratic Party presidential candidate Kamala Harris met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday during his visit to Washington. Although outgoing President Joe Biden's support for Israel always has been, quote, ironclad, many worry that Harris's stance won't be as pro-Israel.
So I just had a frank and constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I told him that I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah. I also expressed with the Prime Minister my serious concern about the scale of human suffering in Gaza, including the death of far too many innocent civilians, the images of dead children, and desperate, hungry people fleeing for safety, sometimes displaced for the second, third, or fourth time. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent.
Harris also stressed the need for a hostage deal.
Let's get the deal done so we can get a ceasefire to end the war. Let's bring the hostages home, and let's provide much-needed relief to the Palestinian people. And ultimately, I remain committed to a path forward that can lead to a two-state solution.
But experts say that her strict stance on the Gaza war could hurt the chances of a deal. Hostage family members who also traveled to Washington are seemingly more optimistic after meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister.
We did get a commitment from the President and from the Prime Minister that both teams will be working by the hour in the coming days to put out an adjusted proposal to Hamas, and they understood completely and are partnered with us around the urgency.
Netanyahu met with former President Donald Trump today, in which the Israeli Prime Minister received a warm welcome. Relations between the two have been strained ever since Netanyahu congratulated Biden on his election victory in 2020, which Trump claims was, quote, stolen. The two didn't speak since January 2021, but the thaw has finally come in, with Netanyahu calling Trump on July 4th to mark U.S. Independence Day. Today, Trump himself confirmed the healed relationship.
It was never bad. I would say it was always good. No president has done what I've done for Israel, and we've always had a very good relationship. And if I didn't, I have a secret weapon. You know what it is? Sarah. Sitting right over here. I have Sarah. As long as I have Sarah, that's all that matters.
But even though the calm has been restored for now, it's clear that there's a challenging road ahead for the Israeli Prime Minister, regardless of who takes the presidency.
Joining us now in studio is Daniel Sheck, the Director of Diplomacy for the Hostage and Missing Families Forum, and Zach Anders, I-24 News correspondent. A good evening to both of you. All right, we just heard the report. Obviously, the Prime Minister has been quite busy since, we focused, of course, on Kamala and Trump, but the meeting has just happened with the Prime Minister and Trump a short while ago. We know a closed-door meeting. What do you think was discussed? I mean, they're not like the best of friends, clearly.
Well, you never know. On Wednesday he could be best friends, and on Thursday worst enemy. We're talking about a very volatile person, but it's true that since Netanyahu recognized Joe Biden's victory, there were very bad words that Donald Trump had for the Israeli Prime Minister. But, things changed. Now he's a candidate. He might be president. Clearly, these things can be I wouldn't say forgotten. It's not the style of Donald Trump to forget bad things that people did to him. He tends more to forget the good things, but the bad things he doesn't. But it doesn't mean that he won't have a working relationship. I think that what he'll hear, I'm guessing here, is that he would prefer to win the election and enter the White House in January with the war in Gaza over. I think he won't want to deal with this, and that will be his message. Now, I don't know how realistic that is.
Exactly. I mean,
but you know, that's it definitely won't be part of the statement that will come out afterwards. But in the end, we'll know.
We still have some months. Anyway, your thoughts on this, Zach?
Well, I think this is probably the clearest endorsement of Trump you have to date. Obviously, there's been signs along the way, but he's gone to Washington to do a very specific task: speak to Congress. And in that decision-making within his own staff, they decided that he has the time in the middle of the war to travel some 500-plus miles, fly south to Florida, go to a private estate of a former president in the middle of the campaign. We're a few months away from the election day. I think the visuals of the staffs and Netanyahu and Trump meeting each other on the steps of his Mar-a-Lago estate is quite impressive, knowing that it wasn't that long ago that it was the FBI that were walking up those steps and raiding that compound for top secret documents that were kept at, again, a private compound, a private residence. So it's very clear. It should be very clear that this is the Netanyahu administration making a very clear nod that let bygones be bygones, however you want to look at it. They're very clearly endorsing Trump.
Right. Anyway, thoughts also on Kamala Harris. We know she says a supporter of Israel, but at the same time, very much, focused on the humanitarian crisis and, giving the numbers of how many people in Gaza apparently have been killed. Of course, those numbers are depending on Hamas's numbers. So it seems like she's also taking a very hard stance.
It's your point of view. I don't think that having a thought for humanitarian issues for the Palestinians means a hard line against Israel. I think you can be pro-Israel and still think that it's maybe not a good thing that Palestinians suffer. But in any event, don't forget we're talking about an election campaign, and we're talking about a Democratic Party that has a very wide range of opinions. And the most natural thing would be a division of labor between the president and his vice president. The president showing the more compassionate side towards Israel, his devotion, emotional, military, diplomatic, all you want. He was really impeccable for these 9 months. And she's taking care of the more liberal, more left-wing fringe of the Democratic voters. They need to win an election. We tend to forget sometimes, sitting here in our studio in Jaffa, that American presidents get elected not only around their stance about Israel. There are also other issues.
Of course.
And so I think that's a natural thing. And we might hear this more and more now that she's become, or will most probably become, the candidate for the run against Donald Trump. And in this sense, it will be interesting to see who she chooses as a running mate, because it might be, a flip side of what we see now, that the candidate is more to the liberal side, and the candidate for the vice presidentship will take care of the more center-left.
Right. All right, we'll be back with both of you in a minute. We're going to now go live via Zoom to Newsweek columnist Mark Schulman. Good evening, Mark. Good to see you. Unfortunately, you're not in studio with us, but what do you make of all of the meetings that the Prime Minister has had with all of the powers that be in Washington?
Well, he had 3 meetings. He met with all 3 people, the one in charge, the one who may be in charge, and the other one who may be in charge. It's not clear what he accomplished or didn't accomplish. It doesn't seem like he got the ship full of bombs released. That's unclear yet at the moment. He met Harris for the first time as a candidate. I mean, I think we are in Israel, we're looking laser focus on the 3 paragraphs she talked about the Palestinians and not the 8 paragraphs she talked about what happened to our people on October 7th and her support for Israel and everything else. If you look at the whole of her speech, it was only a small percentage of it towards the suffering of the Palestinians. He's now with Donald Trump, making up with Donald Trump. Trump now needs Netanyahu as much as Netanyahu needs Trump. He's come at the most interesting time in American politics in a long, long time. We thought it would be a very boring election year for those of us who write about American politics. It was boring for quite a while, and now this is going to be the most interesting 100 and number days to the election that we've probably had in the longest time. So he's in the midst of all of that. He's not getting very much publicity in the United States because immediately, he spoke in Congress, and then, of course, the president then gave his address explaining why he's leaving the presidency. So it hasn't had a big impact. It had a very nice impact on American Jewry. They were all thrilled. And of course, the last and most important thing is the hostage situation. And he seems to be trying to avoid coming to a deal at this point. He was looking for American support for his new demands, which were additional demands beyond his original package. And it doesn't look like the Biden administration is giving him support for that. But he's gone ahead anyway, so we'll see where that goes.
So if you, were to harbor a guess, what do you reckon the Prime Minister and former President Trump talked about?
Look, Trump said before they got there that Israel has to end this war now. He looked at it from a different perspective. He looked at it from the public relations perspective. And say what you want to say about President Trump, public relations is clearly his expertise. And he's seen what this war has done to our public perception, both in the United States and in the world. So he's going to try to tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, get this done now. He also doesn't want this on his plate when he becomes president, if he becomes president. So he'd like to get this done now. Any of the terrible parts of this deal can get done during the Biden administration, so he can blame them for any negative things that might happen. So I think he's going to be pressing him beyond all the smiles and say, listen, don't wait for me to come into office to hopefully save you in whichever way he's talking about it. So I think he's telling him, get the deal done now. Now, there's a bigger question, which we haven't really discussed, and that's Iran. And that's really our most significant problem. And it's not clear whether he spent any time discussing that with Trump right now or spent any time with Harris or with Biden really discussing the Iranian problem, which is beyond all of our little problems, quote unquote, with Hamas and Hezbollah.
Right. Any final thoughts? I mean, obviously, the Prime Minister's had a packed schedule. Obviously, meeting with Biden, who is committed to try to see all of his work through since October 7th. I mean, do you think that whoever walks into the office come January will do so with the hostages home and this war over?
Listen, I sat on this channel back in November and December, and people said to me, well, what's this going to affect the elections? And I said, I almost laughed. I said, November? We're in December. The war is going to be long over before the elections come. And here we are in the midst of it. The war is still going on. The hostages are still being held. I can't imagine us getting to January without this being resolved. I don't know how many will be alive if we go on until January without this being resolved. I also want to say one other thing. Before he came on this trip, and it was before Biden was, he obviously left after, but when Biden was resigning the race, so to speak, you could assume the fact that the odds were really, really high that President Trump would be the next President Trump. At the moment, it's a total toss-up. And so I'd be very careful, and I hope he's not going too far to put all our chips on one president, because it's not at all clear. I would say it's a 50-50 at the best who's going to win this election. So we have to keep that in mind. Israel needs to play both sides of the aisle. We cannot become the Republican issue or the Democratic issue. We need to remain a bipartisan issue.
All right, Mark Schulman, thank you. And I think the big takeaway is obviously we don't know, and there is not a boring anything in sight between now and November. Definitely not boring.
The Chinese curse is really hitting us heavily, that's for sure.
All right, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
All right, for 294 days now, Danny Miron and the families of the over 100 hostages still left in the dark, yet trying to hang on to whatever hope they can that their loved ones are still alive and will return home. I went to Hostage Square and spoke to Danny Miron, the father of hostage Omri Miron, who was stripped away from his wife and 2 young daughters on October 7th. Here's more from my interview with him.
How do you feel?
I feel very bad because yesterday they brought back 5 bodies, and these are families that I loved, and we have been friends, like a family, for 390 days. The pain is great for everyone, not just the families. And precisely in these days when they retrieved the 5 bodies, the Prime Minister told the delegation not to go to Qatar. It's somewhat upsetting. I don't know the reasons, but he doesn't explain to anyone what he does. And this disturbs many families and lowers our morale even more. Even though there are 5 bodies that have returned, he still gave us this blow that the delegation is not leaving. And we are helpless, not knowing what's going on.
How can you remain hopeful every time the deal doesn't materialize?
It's been 8 months since the first transaction. Every 2 weeks there is a deal on the way, and it breaks the families, kills us completely. It's better that they hold these meetings, and when there is a result, when they bring the children home, they'll say, "We brought the children back." It's better. It won't break anyone.
What do you think of Netanyahu's speech to Congress?
I think his speech did not cover what it should have. It's very nice that he praised Trump. That's perfectly fine. But there is another candidate whom he did not refer to at all. And I think that as a country that is a friend of the USA, we should not interfere in its political considerations.
Does Bibi have any contact with the families of the hostages?
There is contact, but what has it brought so far? I need results. I already said on TV, I have a friend who owns a factory. And if you take someone who is a sales promoter and he works for 3 months and then does nothing, you tell him to go home. And here for 9 months, they're doing nothing.
Omri has daughters, right?
Omri has 2 daughters. The eldest will be 3 years old on Monday and will celebrate her birthday. She has requests and invitations, and the little one, Ella, she already says daddy, but she doesn't know who daddy is. She only knows him from the photo. That's what she was taught. And when I come there and she sees the picture of Henri on the shirt and says, "Daddy, it's very difficult to raise children like that." Ronnie was very close to her father, and 2 weeks ago she got up and told her mother, "I saw father." And she asked her how she saw. She said that she dreamed about him at night, that there was a strong wind and father came. And they went to the playground and played on the swings. She dreamed about him at night, and she remembers the dreams, and after the night when she dreams about him, all day she talks about father. "I want daddy back."
Back in studio with Daniel Sheck and Zach Anders. I know it brought tears to my eyes when I was speaking to him. I mean, just to see just to see his beard. He's been growing his beard. And I mean, if anything shows the length of, 9 months, you can see it there. But I mean, when he's talking about these little girls and a baby turning 1 that only recognizes her father from his shirt is just gut-wrenching.
Yes, so Danny Miran is one of the most astonishing people that I have met in the forum. And since he doesn't like to speak in English, so when he meets foreign guests, I translate, and so I know his story by heart. I've told it many, many times, and it brings tears to my eyes, even the 50th time. And you know, he's very practical about this. When you ask him about the speech in the Congress, he says more or less what Mr. Schulman just said, that it might have been a mistake not to consider it as a bipartisan issue. And he also says that if you have these negotiators and they can't conclude a deal, he doesn't say directly the Prime Minister, but I think he means him, then he should hand it over to someone else. And he also, I think I found this very special. I always say here that you have to consider that all the ups and downs that we hear in the media, this story, that story, it resonates 10 times louder in the ears of the families.
Yeah.
And he says, "I wish nobody would tell us anything, and they would just tell us when it's done."
Exactly, because it's like every time there's something. I mean, look, I think we'll see in one of my next reports with the father of Omer Wenker from last week. Oh, looks like there's a reason to hope, and now here we are. The Prime Minister didn't go to D.C. to announce with a big announcement, which people had hoped for. The delegation's supposed to go to Qatar. They haven't gone yet. You know, what is this about? And will they go to Qatar next week? Do we know?
Well, actually, we've just got an update from Florida that there's going to be a meeting now in Rome, and that's where the negotiating teams and the CIA director will meet next. And similar to I believe it was about a month and a half ago when they met in Paris, the teams met there.
They sometimes do away from the region.
Yeah. So this is something to watch, and we just don't know what day.
But, you know, I'm sort of wary of all these travel plans. Does it really matter if they go or don't go, or does it matter what they have?
What they come back with?
Yeah, what kind of mandate they have, what can they negotiate? I'm not the only one, but many people have been saying, including family members, months ago, that the methodology is wrong. Instead of you know, renegotiating the mandate of the team every time they come back for every separate paragraph of the deal, these are people with a lot of experience, with a lot of clout, with a lot of know-how that you have chosen to negotiate as your negotiators. Send them, tell them, negotiate the best deal you can get, and then bring it back, and the government will decide if it's good or not. That is obviously the political people who have to make the decision. But give them a free hand to negotiate, and then you see. But now, I mean now, for 8 months now, it's been going on and off that we're negotiating, and for the last 2 or 3 months, we're negotiating the same text, which in theory was drafted by Israel and the United States. So the basis is theoretically a document that Israel has approved, but the Prime Minister keeps making changes. I'm not saying it's illegitimate. It's legitimate to have new demands, maybe things have changed, etc. But there seems to be a kind of unanimity in the last few weeks. The Americans, the Qataris, the intermediaries, the Israeli negotiators, the army top brass, many of the politicians, including unexpected forces like Shas, for example, they all say the time is ripe for the deal to be concluded. And the only real exception is the Prime Minister.
You know, you made a really good point about mandates. And when we're talking about negotiating from a position of strength, does going and speaking to Congress bolster your position of strength? And I would argue that what we saw as a result is bolstering Hamas. The images that come out of the counter-protests, the American flag that's burned in front of Union Station, this is all the sort of thing that Hamas has been playing into and playing for, discourse and disruption, and the American support fracturing and pulling itself apart from within. So you go and give this speech to Congress. You don't say anything or do anything that Hamas hasn't already heard a million times before.
Well, and it's in their interest to extend it more. Now they know they have, an election to wait for in November. I mean, what's the incentive for Hamas to actually make good on a deal?
In American cities for weeks to come. More protests, more American flags. There are guys dressing up like Hamas spokespeople with the same exact outfit and bandanas and costumes, sitting there in New York City, hiding their identities and burning American flags on American streets. That is a psychological win for Hamas.
All right, we'll be back with both of you in a moment. Now, meanwhile, turning to the West Bank, a commander of the Islamic Jihad in Tulkarm said to be responsible for shooting into Israeli neighborhoods and having rockets ready to be shot into Israel, has escaped from a local hospital. Abu Shuja, who has been wanted by both the Palestinian Authority and Israel, with Israel trying to apparently assassinate him a few months ago. Thousands of Palestinians surrounded the hospital as the Palestinian Authority police tried to arrest him. However, instead of succeeding, the crowd helped Shuja escape. Zach, what can you tell us about this? I mean, this is somebody, apparently, I mean, what have you been able to learn about this figure, and how dangerous of a person is he?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's been mostly underreported, and very few images came out of the West Bank this afternoon from this event. We do see dozens in some of the images in this crowd at the hospital site. And the crowd, as the camera pans to the outside, massive. But what we're learning through a source to I-24 is that the PA was attempting to make a move into the hospital and to perform an arrest, and that word got out, and that's when I'll categorize this as at least dozens got inside the building, just based on some of the visuals that we have of the scene, and then disrupted this, and this PIJ commander escapes. And we, again, don't know exactly where. But should stress that with this incident and with what we've seen play out in the West Bank. The IDF has been performing really pinpoint, and their intelligence still in the West Bank is has led to really high-level arrests in these operations.
Right. Well, he also wanted by the Palestinian Authority. I mean, what does that tell us? That, you know, even with the fact that it was the Palestinian Authority police that were trying to arrest him, that all of these people did the same thing. It's showing what? Not a respect for their own security, rather.
It's another example of the PA having another bad day, and that this continues to demonstrate how fractured the West Bank is, that the Palestinian Authority's ability to govern and to be in charge is strained, and their future, their path ahead is going to be a tremendously high hill to climb.
And with that, I mean, given at least it seems that they're trying, I mean, how would that, you know, encompass working with Israeli forces moving forward if there is an attempt to have law and order in the West Bank?
The truth is that they are working with Israeli forces. It's in a more strained atmosphere, but probably the most stable remnant of what was once known as the Oslo Accords is the security cooperation between Israeli security forces and the Palestinian police. You know, the proof is in the pudding. If it wasn't disrupted ever, cut off ever by any government, left, right, wall to wall, they all kept it going, then there is probably a reason, because it's beneficial to both sides.
Mm-hmm. All right, we'll be back with you after the break. We're going to take a short break now. Coming up after the commercial, the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics kicks off on the River Seine, but security concerns mount with an estimated 15 million people attending the Olympic Games. We'll break it down for you when we come back.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to I-24 News. I'm Emily Francis. Italy has decided to appoint an ambassador to Syria to turn a new spotlight, quote unquote, on the country. This, according to Italy's foreign minister earlier today, with Italy now being the first G7 nation to relaunch its diplomatic ties in Damascus since civil war consumed the nation. Italy recalled all staff from its embassy in Damascus in 2012, suspending diplomatic activity there to protest the, quote, unacceptable violence of the government of Bashar al-Assad against its own citizens. All right, we're back in studio with Daniel Sheck and Zach Anders. Obviously, you being a former ambassador to France, what do you make of, not only reinstating an ambassador, but Italy specifically?
I'll be honest, this is the first time I hear about it, and it's a bold move. It's a big move. I'm trying to think what the purpose is. But Italy under Giorgia Meloni has done a lot of things that are sort of out of the box. Inside Europe, concerning the war in Ukraine, and maybe now in Syria. Maybe you pointed out they are the first. Maybe they want to be the first.
Maybe that's what it's about, right?
For some reason. Interesting story to follow.
Yeah, and what would be their incentive? Like, what would they have to gain by being in Syria?
I've heard multiple arguments made today that this is to combat Russia's influence, to begin to heal some of the elements of what's caused such a great migrant crisis. A lot of that does stem from Syria, and Italy has been on the brunt of a lot of the boats in the Mediterranean. That said, being a journalist around combat, Ukraine and here, there is not, I don't think, amongst my colleagues, somebody who doesn't look at Syria and the Assad regime with utter disgust. The 500,000 dead at his hands, the amount of blood that drips through his administration and his dictatorship is, I don't think, something that you can politically reason with. And to send diplomats and emissaries, what do you accomplish with a bloodthirsty dictator who kills his own people, gasses his own people? If anybody really wants a taste of how horrific some of this has been, I'd say look into how Marie Colvin died and the events around the shelling that was taking place around her at that time, targeting civilians in hospitals and women and children. And that's been a campaign that has existed for a decade now and continues. So this embrace, we know when we see Assad stand next to Vladimir Putin that, that's two of a kind anyways, and when they shake hands, those two have blood on their hands together. Yeah. But to have more members of the West participate in normalizing relations with the Assad regime really is a head-scratcher, really. Not sure where that goes.
Zach's point about the migrants is interesting because on the one hand, he's right. I mean, one of the issues that brought Giorgia Meloni to power was the migrant crisis and the very strong opposition among Italians to the growing number of them disembarking somewhere around Italy or Sicily, etc. And she hasn't been very successful in reducing these numbers. So maybe this is sort of an attempt to try something novel and new.
Or to save face.
Although it has to be said that most of the migrants don't leave Syria now. We're talking about people who left Syria long ago and are in camps in Turkey, in Greece, in all sorts of places.
All over the
world.
They
went through Northern Africa. And we're also not talking just about Syrian migrants. There are many African migrants. And so it's a big story, but interesting to follow.
Yeah, we'll see how
I don't think either that this decision happens in a vacuum. I think potentially this is a European decision, that a test balloon.
Right, and maybe Italy is the first one to
or maybe that there's some collaboration between the G7 with this is actually more about Russia and Syria, and that somebody needs to step in, and I don't know what exactly the purpose is, but with how closely Assad and Putin have been working together and assisting in Putin's campaign in Ukraine, that potentially European leaders need to have a door in being totally shut off from Assad and just allowing him to embrace Putin and them be completely unchecked, unabated. Perhaps this is I don't think that other European leaders, we haven't seen any statements today from the Germans or the French.
I'm sure more will come to fruition for future interviews. We're going to now turn to the situation with the Olympics. Threats from terror organizations as well as activists and beyond are putting security teams and Olympic attendees on edge. Will the two-week international athletic event go on without a hitch? I-24's Alex Schloss has more.
As the Olympics kick off in France, Paris is faced with more than just logistical challenges in hosting the world's biggest sporting event. There's also a multitude of security threats. Just hours before the highly anticipated Games kicked off with its opening ceremony, saboteurs struck France's high-speed train network in a series of seemingly coordinated attacks, causing chaos and stranding thousands of passengers for several hours. There was no immediate claim of responsibility, although security sources say initial suspicions fell on leftist militants or environmental activists. They said there was not yet any evidence.
We can think that the attack was premeditated, calculated, coordinated. Yes, I think they really had the intention to harm and to seriously harm.
A total of 45,000 police officers will be deployed during the Games, along with 18,000 military personnel, 20,000 from private security firms, and nearly 2,000 foreign police personnel. The Israeli athletes will also have a higher level of protection in light of the Israel-Hamas war and the wide array of threats it has brought down upon the Israeli national team. But even with the heightened security, threats of attacks remain abundant from extremist groups like ISIS-K and other groups who may look to exploit the global contest for publicity's sake.
Yes, there are problems. I'm afraid things will get worse, not just for tonight, for the coming 3 weeks, every day. We have to secure all the sporting venues. We have to have more security than this.
Iranian hackers have also threatened to target the Israeli delegation. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz has warned his French counterpart of an Iranian-backed plot to destabilize the event.
We know that the cyber threats are real. It concerns France at all times, and especially now during the Olympic and Paralympic Games, zero risk does not exist. We expect cyber attacks, but the challenge is to prepare ourselves as best we can to limit its scope.
Russia has also raised some alarms, with a 40-year-old Russian man arrested on suspicion of planning to destabilize the Olympics, drawing Russian condemnation. In the past, Russia has used the event as a distraction for its own global ambitions. In 2008, Russia was actively fighting in Georgia during the Beijing Olympics. In 2014, Russia invaded Ukraine just 4 days after the end of the Sochi Winter Olympics. And in 2022, it invaded Ukraine once again 4 days after the end of the Beijing Winter Olympics. As the sporting festivities kick off in Paris, it will be 16 days before it concludes, and we will see if the extra precautions are enough to keep safe the estimated 15 million visitors expected to come to the City of Light for the Games.
All right, back in studio with Zach Anders and Daniel Sheck. Being a former ambassador to France, I'm sure this hits home. And how cool would it have been if you were the ambassador with the Olympics there? I mean, a beautiful opening ceremony, at least nothing seemed to happen. But obviously for the Israeli athletes, it's hard to not be on edge. There's 88 Israeli athletes and threats of a repeat of Munich, which hard to believe, 1972. It's an anniversary pretty much. So is there a real reason for them to be scared, even though they have 24-hour security?
Look, I think we need to look at the broader picture, because obviously the Israeli delegation will get special attention. And I have to say, not just from personal experience, but I know the French are good at this. They are really good. It doesn't mean that it's foolproof. There can always be something that happens, but they know what they're doing. And I think, I trust that they take this threat very seriously. And it might be unpleasant for the Israeli delegation that they can't enjoy the, the atmosphere of the Olympic Village and fraternizing with other teams, etc. It's a bit limited, but you know, that's
it's
life.
All business
and the main
day,
issue is to focus on their performance, and I'm sure that is the main thing. As for enjoying it, you know, true Parisians didn't stay in Paris. They left yesterday, and they will come back in 3 weeks.
I remember when the Olympics were in LA in the 80s, like we all got out of town.
It's going to be difficult to enjoy Paris, but I think it's a once in a lifetime experience, and I hope that Parisians will take it lightly. It's a bit of a nuisance. It interferes with normal life, but it's a great thing for a city to host the Olympics.
And hopefully our athletes will do well and come back with some medals, which would certainly help add to some national
it's not just
pride.
a security threat, it's also an atmosphere that might be hostile in some of the stadiums or in some of the events. And here I hope that the Jewish community and other friends of Israel will just step up and cheer the Israeli team as best they can.
All right. Thank you both very much for your insight. Much appreciated. Now we are going to go live to London, where we're joined by counterterrorism expert Khalid Hassan. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So we heard just in the studio, we had a discussion. The opening ceremony went on without any problems, a beautiful way to demonstrate the beauty of Paris and to showcase the many athletes from how many different countries, from 206 different nations. But obviously security, a huge issue with threats from ISIS, obviously a lot of security officials. Is there a real reason to have concern about something going wrong in spite of the fact that there is a very well-developed security force?
Yes, there absolutely is. It's very obvious by how the French state is actually reacting to a potential threat. I'm sure they have intelligence that not all of us will be aware of. I'm sure also it's part of how they operate because they don't want to cause panic. But we're looking at least at 60,000 police officers and military personnel. We're looking at a number of nations, foreign nations, that have actually contributed and sent police officers, K9 units, and have sent also military personnel and counterterrorism experts. I think we also face this time, which is really unprecedented, state actors and terrorist groups. So the most concerning threat from terrorist groups is obviously a lone wolf attack, which is something that cannot be prevented in many ways. But now we also have state actors. And I think we need to tie this in to President Macron in June warning of a potential civil war if the far left or the far right win. I don't want this to just pass. I don't want this event to just end and, hopefully safely. But after it does end, I think the French need to have a serious conversation about where France is actually headed.
Also, 15 million people planning to attend. We had, these arsons and all of these things happen within, on the, the trains, which, all things converging. People, it's affecting everybody traveling by train, not just within France. So the fact even that something like that was able to happen, also a cause for concern, with Israel's defense minister saying, all hands look toward Iran with that. Do you think that is a likely explanation that had to do with some kind of terror cell?
Absolutely. I think what we lack in the West is this recognition that we're actually facing a war. There is a global jihad, a movement of global jihad. When pro-Palestine, as they like to call themselves, pro-Palestine activists call for globalizing the Intifada, this is what we're seeing right now. We're trying to prevent the globalization of the Intifada. And the Intifada is something that obviously Iran is very involved in, and Russia will be involved in, not for ideological reasons, but just for the fact that it's a great opportunity to, just jump in and contribute to this, to increasing the threat and to targeting the West. So we now have Iran, we now have Russia, we now have ISIS, now we have obviously the threat of people inspired by Hamas or people who support Hamas. So I think it's a multi-dimensional challenge, and it's really a multi-dimensional threat. And I think it needs to be treated as such. What I find concerning is that politicians want to convince us that this is just business as usual. These are security arrangements. Yes, it's a bit too much this time, but it's, it's going to die down and we're going to go back to business as usual. That's not the case. We need to understand that this is not the case. And we need to ask about the Jewish community, how they feel seeing all this happening. I mean, the Israeli delegation, pretty much has a little army following them right now. Is this normal for France in 2024? Is this what we should expect the next time the Israelis are in any European capital?
Right. That's a very good question. And, let's also go into the fact that things have happened in the past. I can remember the Atlanta Olympics. There was the Boston Marathon terror attack, obviously Munich, 1972. So obviously the Olympics also always a target for hate groups and terrorism. I mean, do you really think that the detail and the attention to the fact that, especially because of the war, obviously there's more heightened awareness of things going wrong. But like you said before, is it possible to really seal off any kind of person who wants to instill harm?
It's impossible. You cannot do this because you don't have enough security. You don't have enough military. It's absolutely impossible. So there is always the potential for somebody stabbing someone. You cannot prevent every knife in Paris. You can't detect that. It's definitely impossible, and I really do hope that we're not going to see something unpleasant. But they are aware of this. They're aware of the fact that, this is why they have security arrangements around key targets to ensure that these key targets are not targeted. But they also know that there could be potentially a stabbing, and they will respond to this, I believe, efficiently. But my concern is, again, why we're not seeing this as part of a bigger picture when it comes to the threats facing Europe today. And I think this is my main challenge. We'll see the 60,000 police officers and military personnel. Obviously, they'll be very effective. But, this is a certain perimeter. They're not doing this across all of France. And as we have seen before, there are cases of even asylum seekers targeting a children playground, which was in France not long ago. That was awfully unpleasant. I'm hoping something like this will not happen.
All right. Thank you very much, Khalid Hassan.
Thank you.
And let's hope these Olympics get through peacefully and people can enjoy sports as the Olympics are meant to be about. All right. And now for a different kind of story from the Gaza war. Applications for Israeli citizenship submitted by non-Jewish foreign workers are mostly doomed to fail. One such person, Enrico Basilio, a Filipino citizen and former labor migrant who was deported 22 years ago from Israel, now wants to become an Israeli citizen in order to stay close to the grave of his son. His son, Reserve Master Sergeant Sidric Garin, died in January with 20 other soldiers in one of Gaza's most terrible disasters during the war. I-24 News correspondent Pierre Kochenler brings us the story of a father's struggle to honor his son's sacrifice.
This is the last time that he greeted me, this one that he sent me before he died. Hello, Papa. Happy New Year. I love you.
Cedric Garin was born in the 22 November 2000 and died in the 22 January 24. He is our biological son. Okay. Cedric was born from a relationship that we had without marriage.
Yes.
What you about to sign about affidavit for
the DNA test.
That's it.
In the DNA test to prove that I am the father. We have to respect the Ministry of Interior.
I want to be with him all the time, but it's the plan of God. I cannot do anything.
They know him as a hero. And for you, and for me too. If they will give us an opportunity to stay, to live in Israel, why not? Anytime that I want to visit, I can come. Not the same. I'm in the Philippines. I need to spend a lot of money. That's why I prepare now to live in Israel, to stay. Because my son is here. But I will stay with him here in Israel. I have a lot of pain in my heart that he didn't feel what a father I am.
Reserve Master Sergeant Cedric Garin, 23-year-old, a fighter in the 261st Brigade, fell in the Gaza Strip along with 20 other soldiers in one of the war's worst disasters. Cedric was born in Israel out of wedlock to Imelda Garin and Enrico Basilio, two Filipino citizens who migrated to Israel in the 1990s as laborers. That's where Enrico, who was already married in the Philippines and had founded a family, met Imelda.
The story of the family is so complicated, but I fixed it already between her, between my wife, between our children, my children, and Cedric. As a father, I did a mistake in my life. But for me, it's not really a mistake. There's a love everywhere. Sometimes you have your own. Sometimes you meet somebody that can beat your heart again to fall in love.
When Cedric was about a year and a half old, his father was deported back to the Philippines.
Together with my son, we're walking around. And then I was surprised that there's some immigration police were waiting on me. They say, you are Enrico Basilio, you don't have visa, you have to go back in the Philippines. I told them, it's okay, it's my fault. But I beg you, I have my son, he needs me. So please don't take me back in the Philippines. My son, he grow up not by me. This is all the pictures that I have. It's been a long time. I didn't remove it even a minute in my pocket. When I miss them, even I'm in the Philippines, I look on them.
Imelda raised their son on her own, but during the 22 years Cedric and his dad were separated, they remained in constant touch.
It's been a long time. But when he was at the age of 9 years old, he came together with the mama to visit me in the Philippines, in my house together with my children and my wife. At the second time that they came to visit me as 2015, when he was 14 years old.
The last time you saw your son was in 2015?
Yeah. And after that, all the time, just we talk only in the phone. How are you, anak? How are you, papa? How are my brothers and sisters? I said, it's okay. How about your situation in Israel? Papa, it's not so easy because, you know, there's a lot of balagan in Israel now. I say, you must be careful, anak. Anak, it means son. All the time, I'm asking him, my son, where are you now? I'm in Gaza, Papa. You are inside Gaza? No. They didn't tell the truth. No, Papa, I'm only stay in the border.
Cedric wanted to be Israeli, right?
Yes.
He wanted Israel to be his home.
Yes.
Cedric was granted Israeli citizenship after completing his military service voluntarily in the Givati Infantry Brigade.
I told you, you are a citizen of Israel, but you are not really Jewish to fight for that country. You are Filipino. Do you know what to say? Yes, Papa, I know I'm Filipino. In my whole body. But please, Papa, in my heart, it belongs here. This is my country. This is my place. I need to protect it. He's gone, but I'm proud of him, even so hard.
How did you know that he was killed?
I received a message called the Israeli embassy. I call and I say, yes, this is Enrico. Anything I can do? They say, you want to go in Israel to have a visit? I told them, what kind of visit? Tell me the truth, what happened? They say, your son is dead. I don't know. I feel the whole world was dropped on me. And then they say, if you want to go back in Israel to be with your son, to attend the funeral, so we will fix everything.
Israel paid for your ticket?
Yes.
You have a family in Philippines?
Yes.
You have a family here?
Yeah. That's why I'm asking for my citizenship if they can give it to me. I talked already to my real family and they let me to be with her because of the situation. I cannot leave her. And then if I want to come to visit in the Philippines, it's easy for me. I work, and then maybe once in a year, I fly to visit my family. But I'll try to do the best things for my two families. That's the life of every Filipinos working in abroad. We prepare to stay together. We are not young, you know. So this is only about our son.
You're ready to accept that Enrico will be part of your life?
Just only the companionship. If I cry, if I'm lonely, there is someone.
All right, it appears that we have had a technical issue, thank you so much for watching. We're out of time. I'm Emily Francis. Take care.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות i24 News.
i24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
i24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, i24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on i24 News.
Hvala vsem, ki ste prišli in najboljši ste.
Bienvenidos a News 24, el magazine de análisis y noticias en español de i24 News. Yo soy Nicole Michel. A petición de nuestro querido público que nos ve desde Estados Unidos, América Latina, como en Europa y Medio Oriente, a continuación hemos preparado un programa muy especial, los Best of the News 24, las entrevistas y reportajes que más impactos le generó, porque hemos creado en español un periodismo de nivel desde Medio Oriente. La lucha contra el antisemitismo es fundamental. En una entrevista exclusiva para i24 News, el comisionario Fernando Lottenberg de la Organización de Estados Americanos dejó clara la postura de la organización hacia el mundo judío.
Nos conseguimos con el prestigioso abogado y constitucionalista brasileño Fernando Lottenberg. Fernando, muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros.
Un gusto.
Aquí en Tel Aviv, en i24 News.
Un gusto y realmente un placer poder estar con vosotros.
Muchísimas gracias. Como sabemos, eres comisionario de la OEA para el monitoreo y el combate contra el antisemitismo, algo muy importante en estos tiempos de poder luchar contra la discriminación y el odio, más allá de lo que significa el combate al antisemitismo, ¿no?, en el judaísmo. Ha sido presidente de la Federación de Comunidades Judías de Brasil. Eres un gran defensor de la democracia y todos los derechos humanos. ¿Cómo hacer todas estas actividades? Y sabemos que viajas por distintas partes del mundo en unos momentos tan difíciles que ha vivido Israel a partir del 7 de octubre, pero algo muy importante también de recalcar, no es tan solo Israel, el mundo judío. Y tú que representas todo lo que tiene que ver con un continente, el continente latinoamericano, con una comunidad hispana que son 600 millones de personas.
Sí, bueno, estar acá después del 7 de octubre por la primera vez ya es una experiencia muy impactante, porque habemos escuchado, habemos leído, visto en la televisión y sigo i24 en las redes, pero cuando te vas a Niroz, cuando te vas al Festival Nova y hablas con la gente que estuvo ahí, es algo muy, muy distinto y que emociona mucho. Y nosotros estábamos viendo en nuestra parte del mundo cómo se incrementó el antisemitismo a partir del 7 de octubre. Hubo una pequeña ola de buena voluntad, de comprensión, pero luego se pasó y vimos la gente hablando las cosas como comparando a los nazis o hablando de genocidio y usando términos que no imaginábamos que sería posible. Así que creo que esta función, como la de los otros colegas que tenemos, demuestra que países, gobiernos, instituciones multilaterales están preocupadas porque el antisemitismo es algo que empieza con los judíos, pero no termina con los judíos. Y es algo que puede ser un instrumento que va al final derrotar tanto la democracia como los derechos humanos.
¿Cuál es el compromiso ahora, Fernando, que tiene la Organización de Estados Americanos, su secretario general, Luis Almagro, que ha sido un gran defensor de los derechos humanos en distintas partes de Latinoamérica y en general de lo que significa la importancia de la lucha contra el odio y la discriminación? ¿Cuál es ahora el enfoque que ha dado la Organización de Estados Americanos con respecto a Israel y al mundo judío?
Bueno, sabes que la Secretaría General de la OEA ya adoptó la definición de antisemitismo de la IRA y es parte de mi mandato expandir esa adopción por otros países. Hoy tenemos en las Américas 7 países que ya la adoptan y en mi mandato 3 se agregaron, que son Colombia, Guatemala y Panamá. Esta es una lucha permanente, tiene la comprensión del secretario general y el incentivo, y él ha publicado ya desde el comienzo, después del 7 de octubre, una condena muy fuerte de que pasó y ahora sobre el ataque de Irán. Así que creo que la posición es muy coherente y clara por parte de la organización.
Exacto, lo hemos visto, estuvieron aquí los gobernadores de Goiás y de Sao Paulo, que ellos también se adhirieron a esta definición y es importante eso impulsarlo, ¿no? Sabemos que tú, Fernando, eres un impulsor de todo lo que es la educación y los tratados internacionales dentro de la Organización de Estados Americanos. Me gustaría saber ahora cómo lo estás enfocando y algo muy importante. ¿Han trabajado ustedes el tema de los medios de comunicación? porque no es tan solo la educación con respecto a los institutos en toda Latinoamérica y los tratados, sino los medios de comunicación.
Claro que sí. Es ahí donde se libra la batalla más importante. Medios de comunicación tradicionales y los nuevos medios que se llaman redes sociales. Es un reto que nosotros estamos enviados especiales de todo el mundo con un subgrupo dentro de nuestro comité para enfrentar esta cuestión. Tenemos en las Américas convenciones importantes, como has mencionado, tratados contra el racismo, contra la discriminación, y incentivamos que más países las adopten y la transformen en leyes internas, porque nosotros vemos la cosa en dos caminos. El primer, de la educación. La gente tiene que saber quién son los judíos, qué pasaron, cuál es su historia, qué pasó en el Holocausto, para que no lo nieguen, para que no lo distorsionen, y hay instrumentos para eso. Brasil, por ejemplo, cuando yo estaba en la Federación de Comunidades Judías, hizo la inclusión en su currículo nacional de la enseñanza del Holocausto. Otros países deben hacerlo también. Y especialmente medios de comunicación y redes sociales, el desafío de la regulamentación es algo que está muy presente. Porque vea, una emisora como I-24 tiene sus reglas, sabes lo que se puede decir, lo que no se puede decir, porque hay leyes que las regulan. Tiene responsabilidad usted como periodista, el editor, el dueño, y en las redes esto no pasa así. Parece que es algo como un territorio libre donde el odio se puede proliferar, donde la discriminación no tiene límites, y estamos muy empeñados en hacer con que esto cambie. Puede ser algo que tiene que ver con autorregulación, que las redes mismas tengan que se poner límites, y el otro, la regulación pública, sea por leyes, sea por decisiones judiciales.
Exactamente. Bueno, el compromiso con los medios y la televisión es un medio que hay que buscar en acercarse y mantenerlo, independientemente que están las redes sociales. Cierto que incluso la Organización de Estados Americanos congrega a todos los países locales, con excepción de Cuba, ¿no? Aparte de eso, España también ha adoptado una legislación contra la lucha contra el antisemitismo. ¿Cómo es esa lucha en una diversa América Latina?
Bueno, sabes que tenemos...
Y mundo hispano.
Sí, tenemos América Latina, tenemos Américas en general, porque Estados Unidos y Canadá también son parte de la OEA. Sí. Y claro, hay que hacer las cosas distintas por cada estado. La OEA no es una organización que está por arriba de los estados. En verdad, los estados son parte de la OEA y tienen representantes generales permanentes que conducen la organización. La secretaría, el comisionado, son instrumentos de su acción. Así que hay que poner, con las convenciones podemos tener algo que sea general, y en cada país buscar legislación específica que pueda atender a la conformación legal local. Por ejemplo, Estados Unidos tiene el tema de la primera enmienda. Claro. Así que es muy difícil poner límites a lo que sea alguna restricción que en otros países como Brasil, Argentina o España sí es posible. Así que estamos luchando para que donde se pueda se sepa que no hay derechos absolutos. Claro. Nosotros estamos muy a favor de la libertad de expresión, y vos conocés por su experiencia en Venezuela cómo este es un bien precioso y por veces raro en nuestra región. Nosotros todos ya sufrimos lo que son dictaduras, lo que son restricciones. Así que no es esto que queremos, pero queremos que la libertad de expresión conviva con otros principios, no con el racismo, no con la discriminación, pero que una cosa se limite a la otra.
Bueno, justamente sacabas el tema de Venezuela, de donde yo soy origen, además de ser israelí. Hay un antisionismo específico en la izquierda, en América Latina. Hay diferentes formas de antisemitismo en América Latina. Hay un fundamentalismo islámico que no concierne al continente, y lo hemos visto reflejado en la penetración de Irán en América Latina, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia, que son países que le han dado la apertura. Por supuesto, eso preocupa a la región, preocupa a Estados Unidos, Canadá. ¿Cómo crees tú que se puede, y en un momento en los que Israel tuvo ese ataque tan fuerte y por primera vez desde 1948, en la creación de su Estado, ¿Cuál es la preocupación que tiene la región con respecto a esa penetración de Irán en América Latina?
Sí, es muy seria, la llevamos muy en serio, porque tuvimos, entre otros, los ataques en Namia, en la embajada israelí en Buenos Aires, que después de 30 años la justicia finalmente confirmó lo que todos ya conocíamos, que Irán lo formuló y Hezbollah lo ejecutó. Así que tenemos, el antisemitismo puede ser de extrema derecha, de extrema izquierda, del fundamentalismo islámico, es como un triángulo y hay que combatirlos a todos procurando entender de dónde vienen. Por ejemplo, si en Charlottesville viene uno que dice Jews will not replace us en la marcha que hicieron, o después en Pittsburgh porque creen que los judíos ayudan a los refugiados a sustituir la población blanca de los Estados Unidos. Este es algo de derecha. En la izquierda es algo que tiene más que ver con Israel y yo personalmente te digo, Nicole, que tengo un poco de restricción al termo antisionismo. Yo prefiero, como otros colegas, el antisemitismo relacionado con el Estado de Israel, porque el sionismo está ahí. Ya es algo que el objetivo del sionismo era construir un Estado en la tierra ancestral del pueblo judío. Está bien, ya estamos aquí y Israel les dice cómo se reencuentra de la Revolución Francesa. No tiene muy sentido, pero la cosa que en el Estado de los judíos, en el Estado donde vive casi la mitad de la población judía mundial, se ve la misma ola, los antiguos tropos reciclados que matan a niños, que están en el control, que es todo tipo de teoría de conspiración que antes era aplicado a los judíos y después del Holocausto ya ser antisemita no es algo aceptable, ahora se torna contra el Estado de Israel.
Muy corto ya, los pogroms en noviembre de 1938 sucedieron, los ataques el 7 de octubre de 2023. Han pasado ya 85 años. Fernando, ¿cuál es el compromiso ahora para la lucha contra el antisemitismo?
El compromiso es de seguir luchando firmemente contra todo tipo de discriminación, contra el discurso de odio y contra los ataques violentos a los judíos, sea en Israel, sea en fuera de Israel. El antisemitismo, como yo he dicho antes, es algo que se manifiesta contra los judíos, pero tiene como algo la convivencia democrática. Es algo, una teoría de la conspiración que imagina que hay gente que está en el control, que tiene más poder que los otros, que tiene más recursos que los otros y no puede ser así. Tenemos que estar juntos. La mejor manera de defender a las minorías es defender la democracia, es defender a los derechos humanos y para eso estamos.
Fernando, muchísimas gracias por haber estado con nosotros en I-24 News.
Beit el-Farasha es un lugar de encuentro gastronómico en la ciudad de Acco, donde judías y musulmanas comparten y la magia de la coexistencia tiene sabores orientales. Hola, shalom, salam aleikum. Nos conseguimos en la ciudad antigua de Acco, ante un edificio de la época de los romanos, en Beit el-Farasha, un lugar de encuentro entre musulmanas y judías. Las fotos que se encuentran alrededor son los vecinos de esta casa, de Beit el-Farasha. Vamos a conseguirnos con Katie para saber cómo se vive en este lugar. Hello.
Welcome to Beit el-Farasha.
Thank you. Gracias. Vamos a pasar. Acompáñenme. Cuéntame, ¿por qué has creado Beit el-Farasha? ¿Cuál es el concepto? ¿Cómo ha sido el inicio de este maravilloso proyecto?
Muchas gracias por venir a conocer Beit el-Farasha. Creemos que mucha gente que viene a Acco a pasar unos días y van a hoteles o restaurantes se pierden la oportunidad de poder encontrarse con la gente del lugar. Para que puedan conocernos, abrimos una cocina en Beit el-Farasha, que en árabe quiere decir la cocina de la mariposa. Y queremos que la gente que se allegue a esta casa tenga una experiencia conjunta para conocerse, que todos somos iguales, que tan solo hay que conocer mejor uno al otro. Este es el espacio ideal para que eso ocurra.
Ahora entramos a las cocinas de Beit el-Farasha. Acompáñenme con la directora de este maravilloso lugar, de esta cocina que se llama Hadija. Acompáñenme.
Nos disponemos a preparar cubineya.
Tenemos aquí varios condimentos. Tenemos aceite de oliva, nana y ají picante y cúrcuma. Hacemos una masa y mezclamos todo. Esta es salsa de granadas y hay que poner muy poquito. El que quiera puede después agregar más.
Yo te... A ver. Hadija nos invita a degustar este plato vegetariano al que rozamos un poco de limón para darle más atrevimiento al paladar.
Hadija, yo quería saber un poco de dónde eres, Bei Foad. ¿Naciste aquí en Aco? Ya.
Yo nací en Aco, me llamo Hadija Abdani. Tengo 3 hijos, 2 niñas y un niño. Soy la cocinera profesional de Bet El Farasha.
Hadija, ¿cómo es la vida entre árabes y judíos?
Este lugar lo que nos permite es conocernos y amarnos. Las delicias que cocinamos les salen desde lo más profundo del corazón. Y yo les devuelvo mi amor a todos haciendo recetas únicas del estilo Aco y sentimos que somos una familia.
Y ahora es fija.
Hoy haremos pan de pita, el estilo Aco, que se hace con agua que contiene azafrán. Agua que preparamos ayer por la noche y la usamos para preparar el pan. Para lograr este color, pusimos el azafrán en el agua y mezclamos con la harina. Tenemos yogurt, miel y carne fresca. Tenemos la carne, a la que le agregamos cebolla y perejil. La salsa tiene pimienta y la mezclamos con la carne. Tenemos pimienta roja, pimienta negra y comino. Con toda esta mezcla hacemos un condimento. Abrimos el pan de pita, que como verán tiene color amarillo por el azafrán.
Es de ella.
Tomamos un poco de carne y los esparcimos cubriendo todo el pan y luego lo pasamos por el aceite de oliva. Al horno va por unos 10 a 15 minutos y tendrán un plato delicioso.
Anat, ¿qué? Tu familia es de Bulgaria. Abba, tu papá. El papá de Anat es de Bulgaria, o sea, son sefaradí. Español, habla español, ladino, ¿no?
Ladino.
Ay, qué maravilla, qué bonito. ¡Wow! Tiene 82 años su papá. Oh, ¡qué belleza!
¡Qué belleza!
¡Qué belleza!
Pincelamos en aceite de oliva las esfillas para llevarlas al horno.
Bien. Muy bien. 10 minutos.
La cocina es un lugar universal. Conecta culturas y personas, risas, una misma pasión, la buena gastronomía, la energía positiva entre judías y musulmanas en Aco. Anat, la israelí, me confesó.
Me encanta latinos.
¡Latinos!
Queremos tridi. Es una mezcla de hummus, galletas, crispy y yogurt al que le agregamos limón y tajina, sal, limón, nana y cúrcuma. Y agregamos un poco de comino.
Y ahora almendras tostadas.
El arte culinario de Aco tiene una importante influencia libanesa, siria y productos agrícolas de las colinas de la región. Quizá la paz en Medio Oriente la podamos lograr a través de la gastronomía, con olores orientales de cúrcuma, nana, azafrán, trabajándola juntas, con las manos, extensiones del corazón.
Y en este lugar tan maravilloso de convivencia entre árabes y judías, nos despedimos en Beit El Farasha con una cocina deliciosa. ¿Y cómo le decimos a todos? ¡Adiós! I-24 News
Unidos estuvo presente en la visita realizada por los gobernadores brasileños de Sao Paulo y Goiás. En la ciudad de Ranana, a unos 15 kilómetros de Tel Aviv, se reunieron con la comunidad brasileña en Israel. Veamos el siguiente reportaje. En la ciudad de Ranana, a 15 kilómetros de Tel Aviv, en su teatro municipal Yad Levanim, la comunidad brasileña, junto a los anfitriones de la ciudad, el alcalde Chaim Broide y el filántropo brasileño-israelí Moti Sonnenfeld, recibieron a los gobernadores de Sao Paulo, Tarcisio de Freitas, y de Goiás, Ronaldo Callado, quienes han visitado Israel con la organización de Conexión Israel, un viaje de encuentro con la tragedia vivida en tierras hebreas. Cada uno de los importantes presentes nos dieron sus impresiones que conecta Israel y Brasil.
ברעננה יש את הקהילה הכי גדולה של עולים מברזיל, וכאשר אני כראש העיר מקבל כאן שני מושלים שתומכים בישראל, אנחנו עושים את הכל לחבק אותם ולהגיד להם תודה. אנחנו זקוקים לתמיכה הזאת היום כשהאנטישמיות בעולם עולה.
A visita de dois governadores dos dois estados mais pujantes da nossa nação aqui em Israel alivia para nós, como brasileiros, a fala malfadada do presidente da nossa república, que não representou a nação na sua fala.
Eu acho fundamental o apoio desses políticos. Eles vieram aqui de coração, eles vieram aqui mostrando carinho pelo povo de Israel, eles vieram aqui para ver a verdade.
Na verdade, esses dois governadores vieram ver de perto qual é de verdade o estado do povo de Israel, o que ele de verdade faz. Eles vêm trazer um pouco de luz no meio de muita escuridão. Então eles visitaram todos os kibbutzim lá do sul do país, onde lá houve os ataques terroristas do Hamas, desses desumanos. E eu acho que a visita deles para cá pode trazer um pouco de luz para o mundo inteiro. Em primeiro lugar para o Brasil, que tem muitas informações, desinformações, coisas erradas que falam lá em relação ao nosso país, ao nosso povo, o povo de Israel. Então, com essas informações, com essa visita que eles vieram para cá, eles estão vendo o que de fato aconteceu, eles vão conseguir influenciar as pessoas que estão perto deles para entender melhor um pouco do que é o povo de Israel, o exército de Israel, que é o exército mais ético do mundo, e tudo que eles fazem é para nos defender desses terroristas que nos querem atacar.
Nosotros en Israel amamos a Brasil, nosotros sabemos que Brasil también ama a Israel y esas relaciones no pueden desaparecer ahora, que decir, desde la creación del Estado de Israel, con la ayuda de Osvaldo Aranha, tenemos esas relaciones tan cercanas y ellas tienen que seguir y seguir mejorando.
I made this book in Portuguese because I have many followers from Brazil that love Israel, they love the Israeli food, they love the Israeli lifestyle.
El himno de Brasil, compuesto por Francisco Manuel da Silva, el aplauso, la guitarra, el discurso y las emociones. El recuerdo a Naamá Levi, secuestrada, hija de la ciudad de Ranana. Los gobernadores y sus palabras de apoyo.
Naquele momento, brasileiro, aí sim homem que tinha postura de estadista, Osvaldo Aranha, presidindo a sessão na ONU, com a visão de homem solidário, humanitário, digno do cargo que ocupava, soube numa votação histórica na ONU reconhecer por 33 votos a 13 a vitória do Estado de Israel e do Estado da Palestina. A construção de um povo que, sem dúvida alguma, soube superar dificuldades. De mais de 10 mil palestinos haviam sido tratados nos hospitais. E eu fico imaginando, porque como médico que sou, nada é mais gratificante na vida do que o gesto de cidadão que foi operado. Às vezes a gente não se lembra dele, mas ele não nos esquece. E ele sempre dirige uma palavra, graças a Deus.
Nós temos que dar suporte para vocês. Nem que seja, às vezes, a simples palavra. Estamos juntos, estamos aqui, não vamos deixar vocês sozinhos. E a gente fica pensando, meu Deus, por que tanta perseguição? Imagine que o povo que foi escravo no Egito, que sofreu com babilônicos, que sofreu na mão dos romanos, que sofreu os horrores do Holocausto. E a gente imagina que nada de ruim vai acontecer depois de uma tragédia tão violenta, de algo tão agressivo. Esse povo é barbaramente atacado no dia 7 de outubro. E por quê? Por que razão? Se enganam quem pensa que aquela turma, aqueles terroristas do Hamas, querem um Estado palestino. Não querem. Está claro que eles querem a destruição de Israel. E esse é só o começo.
Obrigado, gobernadores.
Hasta aquí nuestro programa de hoy. A través del QR nos